See the emergency
You
contact?
get a Boy Scout once in a while. That's a merit badge.
So I have to.
Citizen.
Is it
service.
victorious?
Well, it's citizen in the community or something like that. You know.
Dispute the charge. I'm not going during June. Like I don't want to go jogging anymore. I already went. And it was just like
And now the ones that I moved over, I don't know.
she was like, I was like, I'm so
They're
mad.
setting on a
Dude, I think I lost.
to tell it to stay on and not shut off. They're like
There
how
it
long
is.
it stays
Oh,
on.
There it is.
this is definitely.
It wouldn't have been an issue. The only
looks-
thing,
Display there.
Display.
Here,
if she thought I was saying,
So I didn't have any.
cancel this
Change the brightness.
this is one that
You could just break this humanly possible.
Yeah, it still seems kind of dark.
and it would have been before the 20th.
Oh,
Maybe that is
Why did it go to
display.
yours and I think it was
On.
Oh, God, I just.
great. All right. Let's get started this evening. So the board, first up, is we're going to recognize our departing student council, our representatives from the board here. Can you believe a year's gone by? So I just kind of wanted to have an opportunity for all of us to express our gratitude to you both, and just maybe take a minute to maybe share what your post-high school plans are, or anything you want to share about your experience that you enjoyed, or any recommendations for how to improve, or anything you want to share. This is your time. So, Ileana, or...
First of all, thank you so much. It's been such a cool experience to be able to be a part of like this entire school board. And so my post-grad plans are I'm going to the University of Minnesota to study finance.
Oh, great.
Thank you also, second what Ellie said. I'm going to Rockhurst, it's in Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm going to play D2 lacrosse, and I'm unsure of a major, but I think I'm going to do biomedical engineering.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Well, it went by fast.
Did.
Thank you so much for everything that you've just, by attending the meetings and contributing and sharing the perspective of our students. It's a voice we're fortunate to have on the school board. So thank you very much. For your year of dedicated service, you get a certificate. So Eliana and Kara, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we hope you come back and visit us. But we have a whole meeting here, so you're not gone yet.
Okay.
We're going to move on to our next item of business. Unless, did anyone else? I should say, did anyone else want to say
Yeah,
anything?
but they're
Yes.
talking about their grad school plans, but I think not yet, because they are still on the lacrosse team, and they have a very good chance of going well into state. So, let's keep the focus, and then get on to your after-school plans. So,
Keep your eye on what's important.
still ponies, for a couple of weeks.
Till June.
Exactly. Great.
Come to the games.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Tonight we don't have any public comment, and so we're going to call this meeting to order. Joan?
Dr. Hockert.
Here.
Dr. Kelsenberg.
Here?
Dr. Lauer.
Here.
Dr. Petrie.
Here.
Dr. Porbeni. Dr. Thielander.
Here.
Chair Sherman.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I will go ahead and make a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
Great. Director Petrie with the second. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Great. We're going to go ahead and move on to our last student report from you guys.
Okay, I can start with the sports report. The season is winding down for teams. Boys tennis finished second in the conference and lost in the semi-section finals to Mounds View. They will compete in individual sections next week. Both boys and girls lacrosse teams won their conference and will finish the regular season with home games on Thursday. Sections will start next. The boys look to be at top of their seed in sections, and the girls will either be first or second seed. Girls softball won the conference and earned the top seed in sections. They begin tonight as the Ponies play St. Paul Central. Baseball finished their regular season with a 7-2 win over Rogers yesterday. They will compete in the first round of sections on Memorial Day. Both Both boys and girls track compete in the conference meet on Tuesday and Thursday. The boys finished 4th and the girls 6th in the state true team meet last Friday. The boys and girls golf teams have been going nonstop these last few weeks trying to catch up with a lot of postponements. Both teams will finish in the conference schedule this week and prepare for sections next week. Synchronized swimming continues to be a near perfect this spring. They have won the conference and section titles, and they will compete in state this weekend. Good luck. The bands, choir, and orchestras all performed last week, and the Pops concert is next week. We are lucky to have so many talented musicians. A big thank you to Tim Wenber, who organized the first boys volleyball intramural league this spring. He and the girls volleyball team worked hard to introduce us to a bridge volleyball season next spring.
I have the student report. As the school year comes to a close, many students are anxious for summer. AP testing has wrapped up, and final projects and tests are nearing. After a great turnout at Student Council hosted 9-10 formal and prom, students are one step closer to the end of the school year. Student Council also recently hosted the senior class's Senior Sunset, where they offered complimentary Nelson's ice cream and yard games. This senior bonding time offered a final school-sponsored event to enjoy the class of 2023's time together. Teacher Appreciation Lunch went well with student letters. NHS hosted their final coffee house of the year and raised $1,500 for the Zach Sobiak Foundation. Overall, the school year has begun to wrap up nicely, and students are eagerly looking forward to next year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent.
Two things tonight. The first thing I'd like to share is, go ahead and pop up that slide if you have it. So we've been working diligently since probably November on an operational plan for the school district, and the board has had a couple meetings on it, and the administration and teacher leaders and other leaders in the district have been meeting, as I said, for months. And we've come up with these 4 strategic directions that I just want to publicly discuss here for a moment. So these were developed really based upon feedback that we received from the community on what we wanted for our desired daily experiences for our students, what families wanted for their students, and really staff's desired daily experience. And so from those surveys and focus groups that we had, we've come up with these 4 directions. Strategic direction A is to ensure the learning process is adaptable to meet individual student needs. So again, we adapt our teaching to meet the needs of the individual student. B is foster a safe, welcoming, and inclusive environment environment for all staff and students. So we want our buildings to be safe, we want them to be welcoming and inclusive, and that's for everybody. Direction C, utilize systems and align resources in an efficient manner to support learning. Everything we do fiscally should be aligned with supporting our students in their learning. And strategic direction D is develop strong partnerships with the communities we serve. Not only the communities, but our families as well. So we are partners in education with the wider community and our students and our families. So these 4 things then are going to translate, and your agendas tonight are a little bit different as a school board. Historically, we've had action items and then reports. Now with the agendas, we are going to have our consent agenda, which is always comes first, which is non-controversial things we ask for the board to approve. And then we are going to have strategic directions throughout the agenda. So for tonight, our first agenda item after the consent will be strategic direction A, utilizing systems and aligning resources in an efficient manner to support learning. So that's where we're going to have, the board will be approving building projects, they'll be giving a budget update, all these things that we do to support learning from a resource perspective. And then the other 3 strategic directions are wrapped in there as well. We will not necessarily hit all 4 strategic directions in one meeting. Tonight, we're only hitting 2 of the 4. So we'll ask for your feedback at a future study session on how you think this is going, or if it's working out for people. And if people at home are wanting to provide feedback and say, well, hey, we like the old way better, we want to hear that too. But we're purposeful about this because we want to align what we are doing as a school system to this plan. And the first way I think we can do that is through the agenda. Questions on any of that? The second thing I want to mention is that as our students say goodbye to the board here tonight, the board is going to be saying bye to Oak Park for a year. This will be our last meeting in Oak Park until probably next summer. So we are getting ready to renovate. We just had the transitions open house tonight. We are now going to be getting to renovate this wing of the building for our ALC students. And so starting on June 13th, we will be having our study session at our learning session at Stillwater Middle School. And then our regular meeting in June will be at Brookview Elementary on June 27th. So we will get the calendar updated publicly so people can know where to find us. But this will give an opportunity for the board to go out and meet in different parts of the district as well, as we will be doing for most of the next year. So just wanted to give the public a heads up. Don't show up here on June 13th. Thank you.
Great. Any questions on that? I'm looking forward, I mean, I know this is a space we've grown accustomed to, but it will be nice to go out to different schools and kind of engage that way. So that'll be nice.
Can I ask a quick question? As we move around, will that impact our ability to stream and record our sessions?
We have a meeting at Stillwater Middle School tomorrow afternoon.
We're going to test it tomorrow, so our plan is just continue streaming. It won't be quite as fancy as it is here, but you should still be able to see and hear what's happening.
Perfect, thank you.
Great.
And in worst case, we'll record and then upload it. So it might not be a live stream in the worst case.
Great. I do not have anything tonight for my report, so we'll move on to the consent agenda, which will be on the screen here. And I will go ahead and make a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, great. We'll go with Director Hockert.
Okay.
And all those in favor of approving tonight's consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. All right, and then tonight we're under our new agenda structure, so the strategic direction, utilize systems and align resources in an efficient manner to support learning. And we have an action item here for our St. Croix Valley Area Learning Center, our ALC Learning Center renovations. And we're going to turn over to Mr. Drummerhausen.
Good evening, Chair Sherman, members of the board. Dr. Funk just alluded to it a little bit before, but tonight we're here for Phase 2 of our ALC bids for our transitions from the ALC program from the high school to here at Oak Park. Last week, we opened up 14 bids for work scopes. The estimate on bid day was $4.8 million, and our bids came under that. For the 14 work scope was $4,156,509. For all 14 work scopes. So we are looking for approval here tonight. We will start construction probably end of September, early October, and be looking to be done around end of March of next year. So it'll be about a 6-month timeline here to renovate space here on the other side downstairs in that lower area here for our ALC space at Oak Park. So with that, I will open up to any questions or comments that you may have.
Are there any director questions? Seeing none, I'm thrilled that it came under estimate. That's always good news. And I think after just a comment after seeing tonight's ribbon cutting at the Bridge Transitions Program, it's just a night and day difference in the learning environment and the space that these students will have to work and learn and grow in is going to be just outstanding. So I'm excited to get this project underway. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the bid packages for the ALC remodel. Is there a second?
Second.
Director Kelsenberg. All those in favor of approving the St. Croix Valley Area Learning Center renovations, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Our next agenda item is a 2023 pavement rehabilitation. Stick around for that.
Thank you, Chair Sherman, members of the board here again. This is the last bid we're bringing to you for this summer's work for our long-term facility maintenance projects. It's our bituminous surfaces, or more of the asphalt areas. We're going to mill and overlay the playgrounds at Afton Lakeland, Lily Lake, and Stonebridge Elementary. And then also, we're going to replace a portion of the parent drop-off area at Stillwater Middle School. So again, we had construction bids that were $395,000. We opened up 2 bids on May 11th, and the lowest bidder was from Minnesota Roadways Company at $371,499. So we're about $20,000 under budget for these bids as well. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or comments that you have, but looking for approval for our bituminous project this summer.
Great. Any questions? I'm going to go ahead and make the motion to approve. Can I get a second?
Second.
Great. Director Lauer with the second. All those in favor of approving the pavement rehabilitation project for this summer, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. And then our last action item here is a resolution non-renewing probationary teacher contracts. And for that, we have Bob Graff. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As stated, resolution non-renewing for a probationary teaching contract.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion to approve the resolution. I know we're going to have to do a roll call vote on this. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Great. Director Hockert with a second. Approving this will be a roll call vote, as I said. So, Joan?
Director Hockert.
Yes.
Director Kelsenberg.
Yes?
Director Lauer.
Yes?
Director Petrie.
Yes.
Director Thelander.
Yes.
Chair Sherman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. So the resolution passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to move on to our first of 2 reports this evening. And we're going to talk facility planning team recommendations. That'll be Carissa, and we have some community guests.
We do. As they come up, I just want to thank you all for allowing us to come and have some of our community members share with you the planning team's recommendation for facilities. As I mentioned in a previous board meeting, we've met on numerous occasions with a great group of community members to talk about the needs of our school district, to review some past plans, look at our future and what has changed, and ultimately come up with a recommendation for this evening to present to you. So I'm really just going to turn it over to them and let them work through this presentation and explain to you what we have here. So I'll turn it over to you, Graham.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening. My name is Graham Arnson. I'm a resident of Oak Park Heights. I have 2 young ponies at home. Maxine is in grade 3 and Otto is in grade 1. So this is kind of near and dear to my heart as we think about the future of our district. So why did we come together? You know, what was our charge? We reviewed the work of the community design team to date. So I was part of that. I think several of my fellow presenters up here were part of that as well, dating back to 2019, so pre-pandemic, right? Feels like a lifetime ago. But we were part of that, and this was really, I think we started with that as a continuation as we thought about what our recommendations were as we came through that first part of it, right, as we went through that work back in the day. Really, the next thing we considered was the new and additional data about district facilities and operations. And I'll share, I think a lot of the data we saw was what we thought about back in 2019 as well, only now it's really kind of coming true. You drive south and there's a lot of developments out there. Our student population is starting to increase, and so the trends we thought about as we made our recommendations back then, we're starting to see come through. It was helpful to see the community survey, think about the building conditions again, think about some of our limitations, what have you, and then talking about funding needs as well and what the community might be open to supporting, right? The last thing we really thought about, the current district priorities and needs, right? What is the current need that we have in front of us, and what are we looking to do? And really, I think from the 4 of us, it was from a community perspective in terms of our interpretation or us kind of reflecting on, you know, what the district's trying to accomplish, if you will. So ultimately, we came up with some recommendations, and those are shared in this presentation as we go forwards. And I know that's a potential lead into a bond referendum this fall, perhaps. So I think we've got some things to share with you. So if we go to the next slide, where did we start, right? What was our kind of intro and what did we deal with first? And it really was about data. And so if you look at the graph, and I know maybe, hopefully you guys have printed copies or versions in front of you, to the left of the line on the graph, right, that's historical attendance, what we've seen as a district. And as you look to the right of that line, that's what we're thinking about in terms of projected enrollment. And you'll notice that goes up pretty quickly. And it's, it's a good thing. The blue line, if you will, that was kind of base case, right? So you think about the things that we're fairly confident, and I think the district is fairly confident will occur. That's the blue. And you can see there's a significant increase in students. My eyesight isn't that good anymore, but, we're going up maybe 1,000 students, right? Which is a remarkable increase for a district. The red is some of those additional developments we've been thinking about or that might come in the future, ones that aren't currently on the books, going through planning in Lake Elmo or Woodbury or what have you. But those are, future developments. If we look at each other when we're honest, they're probably going to come, right? We got a lot of land to develop, and so we anticipate new families moving to the district. It also represents kind of a return to trend, if you will, in terms of market share, how many students or how many families are selecting bringing their families to our district and enrolling their students. That's a much bigger number, right? You're talking about we're starting to approach 10,000 students, a significant increase. I don't know about the percent, but a 20% increase or whatever it might be, that's substantial, right? So, what does that mean? As you go down to the table underneath, right, you can see the current situation where we're at, 87.6% capacity as of this school year. You can look the next kind of row over, if you will, is 26 to 27, and the next row over after that is 2031 to 2032. And so, we've got good capacity right now, right? We can work with it. We can shift some things around, which I know we already have. But as you start to look at some of those scenarios for the future, you really start to understand what the challenge is, right? A growing district is a gift, there's no doubt about it, right? As opposed to a declining enrollment or something along those lines. But it's still a challenge. If you look at 26 to 27, even on our base case, we're at 90%, so we're starting to lose our flexibility. And on the above scenarios, or the red line, if you will, we're at 95.6. If you look out towards the end of the decade, right, and we're still inside of 7 years of that time frame or 8 years, even on the base case, we're at max capacity, essentially, right? And if you look at the red line, we're well above that. We are out of space and by a substantial margin, right? You're talking about a lot of kids needing a place to go, and current facilities don't offer those places, right? So, and as we looked at specific schools, right, and kind of dig a little deeper into the data and understand where we're at and where the real challenges are, it's south of 36. We've got major developments down there, a lot of growth. And so that leads to some significant pinch points, which are already being felt in some of our schools, right? As we toured Lake Elmo a while back, right, several years ago, or Afton Lakeland, or Brookview, which is now expanded. The enrollments, even on the projected, as you look out, again, 2031, 2032, I mean, the schools are bursting at the seams, right? You're 15 to 30% over what we can currently house there, right? A significant kind of capacity challenge that we'll have to address. And that even assumes, right, Brookview's expansion and the boundary changes we've already done, correct? So you got some real issues there. As you look at the potential, right, this would be the red line on the previous slide. I mean, essentially the schools are being overwhelmed at that point. So you're at 130% growth at Afton Lakeland, 125 at Anderson, 135 at Lake Elmo, and 133 at Oakland. Two of those buildings are 100 years old, and they don't really have that much room to expand. And we're already doing, what we can to do that. I would say from the community standpoint, as we looked at this and really thought about our task in terms of trying to help prioritize what you guys are thinking about, it really was, I think there was a lot of urgency related to this when we started seeing some of these numbers, especially when you think, bonds in the fall, takes a while to design, 2 years to construct. Oh, you're at 2026 already. And so I don't get a sense that we've got a lot of time to work with, right? Time is kind of the enemy right now, it feels like. So a challenge. You can go to the next slide. my background was in capital planning. I was a consultant for Xcel Energy and planned multi-billion-dollar budgets for them and thought out 10, 20 years in advance of what that looks like. And it's very helpful to have priorities or objectives you're trying to achieve with the investments you're making, right? Gives you a better chance of success. And then when it comes to tough decisions, which we had to make, what kind of falls on the floor and what are we going to bring forward as recommendations for the board to consider. So the Superintendent Fung provided these, and I think it's extremely helpful to have these because we reflected on them. Every time we had a meeting, we started with this slide and considered it as we went forwards, right? And I think it's good to just read them here. So provide the best educational environment that meets the needs of our students and staff. Prepare the district for future growth. Operate in a fiscally responsible manner, balancing student need with taxpayer support. I would say those are the three things we reflected on very consistently as we thought about the recommendations we wanted to try and bring forward. So with that, I'll hand it over to Molly. I think she's going to talk about one of our tours.
To North Star Elementary. Molly Arneson. I live in Marine on St. Croix. I have 2 ponies at home also. They are middle school boys here in Stillwater, and I am a proud pony alum. So one of the things that we did was tour North Star Elementary, really to get a sense for what does a new school feel like, what is involved in a new school, what does a school with 750 kids feel like, because we are looking at really large populations for these elementary schools that we're talking about. It's located in Hugo. It's in the White Bear School District. Just like our model, it's a K through 5 elementary. Unlike our models, it's designed around what they're calling learning studios with multi-grade opportunities. Some of the features of the building right from the start are safety features. We hear a lot from parents about being concerned about school safety. There's safety glass, there are ways to lock certain portions or close down portions, preventing entry, and this storm shelter construction that is in the gymnasium of the building. If you look at the floor plan overall, you'll see that it's designed around this sort of dark blue space. That's the Learning Commons. We would refer to that in our current schools as the media center. But really thinking about a Learning Commons expands the view and the vision and the use of that space. The light blue is the cafeteria adjacent. And you'll see the kind of yellowish color down the middle and perpendicular on the bottom. That's the circulation area. So when we're talking about using space the best way that we can and maximizing what we have and maximizing student experience, there are not long, skinny hallways that students are walking down, with lockers lining them. And we'll talk a little bit about learning space in a moment, but I just want to point out that feature. We are going to look in a minute at the green spaces. Those are collections of classrooms that they refer to as learning studios. Keep in mind that this doesn't wed us to a certain paradigm of teaching. It shows us what's possible in the use of space and how a school of this size really can still feel like a very intimate experience. We have a photo here of the Learning Commons. This building really gives a nod to its natural environment, the colors and the shapes and the way that it's designed. There's a ton of natural light coming in, and from the very start you see that it's a flexible learning environment. All of these fixtures, I actually don't know if they're called fixtures because they're movable. All of these things can be manipulated by students or faculty for whatever they're using the space for. You'll see to the right in the back of the there's a little stage, so there could be presentations here, students could share their work, there could be guest speakers. And one of the missions of White Bear Schools, and we have a similar mission, I would believe, in Stillwater, is really student agency and student advocacy and student independence. So you'll see in the back is the book checking area, and even kindergartners in this program check out their own books. So it's a lovely space, a lot of flexible use of the space. The cafeteria is adjacent to the Learning Commons. And again, it's got this natural light and sort of these natural elements that feel very calming. Mm-hmm. One of the beauties about designing a brand new school is you can control the traffic flow. Students go out one way and they come in another. And where they come in, there's a hand washing station and there's space for their stuff. So you don't have one class, one class coming down with, wet mittens on the floor and another class trying to get by them. There's also this feature you can see in the left-hand slide of kind of two toppers, right? If a student has a special event or special occasion, there's a spot for a more intimate dining experience, even in a school cafeteria. This is the floor plan of the learning studios. Each of the learning studios has the same elements. They might not be exactly the same construction, but it's a really unique design where they have 5 classrooms creating this kind of pod or studio. When you walk into this space, you feel like you're in a giant living room. It is very comfortable. It's very welcoming. It feels homey. The features of this are really interesting. I'm a teacher, and I think that this is amazing because of the flexible learning space. The furniture, just as we saw in the Learning Commons, is movable. You can use it in different ways. Those of us who have young kids at home, they are no longer sitting at a desk at home doing their homework. And so school is really when we talk about individualized learning and meeting our learners where they are and what they need. This is an environment that helps us to meet those needs. The classrooms, another unique feature is, you see in the sort of top, that staff office and collaboration. No one teacher owns one classroom. So it's a very collaborative environment. It was purposefully built this way. The faculty was purposefully selected as people who want to collaborate and work in this more flexible learning environment. It's really unique because the teachers are forced but interested in working together and using the space so purposefully, so you don't have, cupboards full of your former teacher's books and desks like this full of exploding papers. Kids have totes with all of the materials that they need. Kids have access to laptops or Chromebooks or iPads. If you look at Classroom 4, it's designed so that students each have access to a screen. So no longer do you have one interactive whiteboard for 25 kids. You might have one for 4 kids. A couple other features of the learning studios are that there are small spaces in each one of them. So there's a pull-out space. So we're not walking kids down a long hallway and losing learning time sending them to interventionists anymore. Interventionists are coming to the learning studios using a breakout space here. Students can do small group work there. Each of them, if I remember correctly, also has that sort of calming space. One of our elementary school features in 834 is the green room. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a green room right there? It doesn't always work if it's too far away. There's a mudroom. Kids come in, they hang their things, they have a spot. Again, it's not a hallway full of junk. It is a place, there's a place for everything, and everything hopefully goes in its place. They're really nice restrooms. And then just the space, there are TVs anywhere, so that, not projecting all the time, so that any teacher can use any of the screens wirelessly at any time. The big space is often used for communal meetings. I believe the learning studio we saw had 3 classrooms worth of students. They each do identify with a teacher. Students don't lose that sense of community and that sense of identity with the teacher, but the idea that the teacher can then flex and say, I'm going to do math on the iPad in this room, and you students are coming with me, and I'm going to do math in pencil and paper. We're working with manipulatives over here. These things can all happen simultaneously in this kind of environment. We'll see some photos of the environment. So this is one of the classroom spaces, and you'll see that the door in the middle, or the wall, there you go. So the wall is closed in the first one, if you go back up, and then you see it open. So you can, again, have a classroom full of kids. You can have 2 classrooms full of kids all working together at the same time. There's voice amplification, which we know helps kids to focus and learn sometimes, even if they're not hard of hearing. You can see the cart with their totes. And if you go to the next one, this is another view of a similar space. The furniture, doesn't necessarily come with the building, but it's pretty unique in the idea that, again, we're serving our kids and where they are today as learners, and what their needs are as 21st century vision for education.
All right, so I will lead us into the recommendations. My name is Sarah Van Nuel. I am a Brookview parent. I've got a 1st grader and a 4th grader. I was also on the community design team, so I've been on this project for quite a while, as Graham said. So what did we come up with after all of that data and visiting the school and looking at what our needs are? I'll go through the top bond priorities. First is replace Lake Elmo Elementary within the city of Lake Elmo. And that includes co-locating the Lake Elmo boundary students as well as Amigos Unidos in a single 1,000 plus student campus. We felt very strongly that those two should stay together, and the communities themselves, I think when the community conversations went on, also felt that way. Second is replace Anderson Elementary, preferably in Bayport, and construct a new 600-student school on a campus with appropriate green space, fields, and parking. We also want to add on to and remodel Oakland Middle School to accommodate up to 300 additional students, as well as improve safety and security at Stillwater Area High School, and improve safety and security at schools district-wide. The costs of all of this. In keeping in alignment with the Community Service 1, we looked at keeping the tax burden at around $20 per month per household. Given the median price of $500,000, using estimates from the 2024 taxable reports, this generates about $195 million. So they kind of took that figure and then worked backwards to see, with all of the needs that we have in the community, what can we do and keep within that kind of budget. And Lake Elmo Elementary, I think, has been on this district's radar for replacement for quite a while. And there are some great opportunities with a new facility. The first is increasing the capacity. I think that's the first and foremost driver of the need for a bond, is the increased capacity. In addressing future growth within the community of Lake Elmo. We also need room to expand Amigos Unidos dual language Spanish immersion. The program has quite a popularity, and we could probably make it more robust if it had more room. Also locating the future building further south. Currently, the building of Lake Elmo is not within the Lake Elmo Elementary boundaries. And so moving it south closer to where the population is for that boundaried community. The current building is also not completely ADA accessible, so replacing the building will bring that up to standards. Also having designated specialist spaces. We hear all sorts of reports of kids doing their pull-out specialist intervention work in the hallway where it doesn't give them privacy as they're working on their needs. It's also very distracting for them and for the other kids that are trying to go up and down the hallways to gym. Lake Elmo needs a larger gymnasium, cafeteria, and other community gathering spaces. I think it was pretty well agreed that what the building currently has doesn't meet the needs for the number of students that are in that school. With a new school, we would gain the flexible learning spaces like what we saw at the North Star School. Lake Elmo was built over 100 years ago, and while it has had updates, they've all been on that traditional long hallway with individual classrooms and lockers kind of lining, which does impact that traffic flow, both in the building, and I think this last one is talking about the parking lot and the location of the current building. I'm not in the Lake Elmo community for that, but last summer, that's where after school care, the summer school program was, so I was going in and out of that parking every day, and that is not a great intersection to try and get in and out of as a parent, and I can't imagine the bus drivers getting in and out of there twice a day. The benefits of the one larger school as opposed to the two smaller schools, because this was something we did have, I think, some robust discussion around, because that was not the original community design team's thought. But building one larger school instead of two smaller schools does bring a 20% kind of discount, both in land, in operating costs for duplicating staff, other support, custodial reasons. You just kind of gain better efficiencies with the larger school. And being that it's such a growing location, it seems like it's going to be in a good location for everyone to get to, so you don't have the geographic need for two schools in such a, like, kind of a tight populated area. Second is Anderson Elementary. There are quite a few opportunities with a new facility for that school. That area is going to also have a large capacity issue coming up, both in Anderson and Afton Lakeland. And so if we can build the capacity there along the river, it kind of gives us some flexibility as populations kind of come and go to have something for both of those communities to feed their kids into. We had discussions about how boundaries have shifted over the years with both of those communities, so it kind of has a historic precedent for kind of moving, north and south as the need arises. One of the opportunities for a bigger facility for Anderson is staffing efficiency. We heard about how that school in particular has trouble retaining specialists because it's only a 0.5 position with the number of students that are currently in that building. And so a 0.5 position is not necessarily something a lot of teachers are really looking for. They're looking for a full-time job. So they have a hard time. They get someone that takes the job for a year while they're looking for another position, and then they're wanting to move on. So the kids don't get that experience of having the same gym teacher all throughout their elementary school or the same music teacher all throughout their elementary school. It also doesn't have the flexible learning spaces, just like Lake Elmo. Just when the building was built, that wasn't how we are teaching kids. We need buildings that are designed for how we're teaching kids now. Green space is a big concern at that site. There's not any. The playground that we are using at that school is, I believe, technically owned by the city, who's gracious enough to let us use it. But that site doesn't have much room for expansion. So the idea of expanding there on the current site with the 100-year-old building just isn't really feasible. There's also, just like Lake Elmo, has parking and traffic flow problems because it's based in downtown, and that's hard to move 600 families in and out of, either on buses or being dropped up and picked up by parents. Important site considerations for the current location is that the Minnesota Department of Education has a method of saying how much space an elementary building should sit on based on the number of students, and both of them are undersized. Anderson sidelines per guideline should be on a 14 to 19 acre site, and it currently sits on 1.4 acres. And the playground is only 0.7 acres, and it's owned by the city. Even Lake Elmo, which does seem like it's a larger site, per the guidelines should have 17 to 22 acres, and it currently only sits on 12.8 acres. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you for that. My name is Jeff Holtz, and I'm also a member of the current facilities team and spent time with many of these members on the CDT back in 2019 as well. So this room definitely looks familiar. As was thoroughly discussed already, population is booming. South 36. So it is only logical that Oakland Middle School is short on capacity. And Graham had shown the numbers earlier, is potentially 300 seats short. And there's every expectation as growth is going to continue in the areas where it's not even identified yet, those numbers can continue to be even higher. So with Oakland, it's handling that capacity, that known capacity. 300 students-ish. We'll have a picture on the next slide as to what that could look like. But with this opportunity, there's also the ability to improve some of the core functionality of the building. So that's your widening of your hallways. It's your taking opportunities of, if you put a gym over here, what do you do with the old gym? Well, in this case, that allows for a media center that is appropriately sized. Again, the Department of Education has guidelines as well for media size, and the one in Oakland is nowhere near the guidelines for a building of that size. And as you start to have these opportunities within the building, there's also the aspect, again, having a building that meets the needs of students. Meeting ADA requirements for your students is mission critical. And that's, again, one of the aspects on here. There's also the aspect of being able to improve some of the programming areas that you have. So on the next slide, we'll be able to see it again. In terms of special ed, as an example, you'll be able to update some of your programming needs to be in certain locations where you're able to better meet the needs of our students. The last bullet up there is the gym space. So Oakland Middle School, which again will be well over 1,000 students sooner or later, does not have gym capacity that meets that size. It has a gym, and then it has a curtain with a space behind it. That is not two gyms. It's not fair to the professionals who are teaching our students there, and it's not fair to the students at all. So as we go to the next slide, you can see a mock-up of the potential as to what these changes could look like. And these are potential. The in-depth review with the architects and engineering has not occurred. This is a very high-level possibility, mainly to help and to show a visual as to what it could look like. We all like graphics. I prefer reading books with images. You know. This just makes it easier. So in the northwest corner, you can see what 2 additional gyms would look like in terms of size. To the south, on the central side, you can see what would 10 additional classrooms look like. And in that example, you can see, essentially, you're taking the hallways and you're going to be making a big U-turn around there. And that type of addition would obviously have your common spaces. You're going to be a flexible use. And you can adapt it based upon the needs that are going to exist at that time. If you look right in the middle of the building, where it says it's got green with stripes across it, the media center, that's the current gym. That media center then would be able to be more than adequate for the needs of our students, and especially in terms of meeting the guidelines from the Department of Education. On the northern part of the media center, you can see where it's essentially a possible bump out for your cafeteria. You're able to leverage then those opportunities. This would be able to, you would be able to say, hey, we have additional students. We're coming up close to 1,300. Do we need additional cafeteria space? The answer is yes. And now you have that opportunity. If you look farther to the east, kind of the L-shaped green in the middle, that is going to be a space where, again, you can start to utilize and leverage the fact that you've moved your media center. What are you going to use with that instead? Well, there are opportunities to be able to say this space is better utilized for special ed, for their needs, and updating those facilities for those students. If you look along that in other places where we have toilets labeled, that represents areas where you need to make upgrades to meet the needs of students per the ADA. And again, this entire presentation is about meeting students where they're at, the needs of them from a learning standpoint, and also the needs from a capacity standpoint. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but again, this is an example from a visual. It's subject to change. Obviously, the bond needs to pass, but then there'll be a review standpoint, and you know, maybe the 10 classrooms would be to the left, maybe it'd be in the top right. But if you notice, there's also a couple other outlines on there, and those represent possible additional changes down the road. We don't know what this district will look like in the year 2030, 2050, 2070. But we know there are opportunities that can exist depending upon those needs. As one example, the bump out in the bottom left would be if you centralize the music department. And you, again, create a wing specific for that department, and then that allows you to then change up where they were. And that's just one example. Next slide, please. One of the other opportunities that was discussed thoroughly, both at the CDT and in the current facilities group, involves the entrance at Stillwater High School. For the quantity of students that building serves, the space is not adequate in terms of size, in terms of flow, in terms of design. So what we're looking at here from the aerial standpoint, if you look at the darkest green standpoint, that office addition, that would essentially be a bump out from the current building, and it allows you then to take some of the office space that is above it and bring it down into that building addition, and then the lighter green striped part would be leveraging opportunities in terms of locker space. In the year 2023, I never thought this would be the case because I always used a locker. I was too lazy to carry my stuff, but Lockers aren't being used as much as was originally designed. This building is coming up on 30, over 2 decades, coming up on 3 decades sooner or later, and lockers are not utilized the way that architects and designers thought. So staff at the building have said back in 2019 at the CDT, and again have reiterated this go-around, that that space is more than welcome to be used for this possibility. So essentially what you're doing is you're able to open up your area of gathering, that circle space to the top. You're able to then push the staff offices down, and you're improving the flow. You're having a bigger area. That allows, one, more staff who can assist with kids coming in and out. It allows, two, your staff to have offices then to the bottom, and you're able to change the dynamic of how this works. Because again, there's several thousand students in this building. This design has been asked about now for several years, and this was considered an improvement both in terms of flow and in terms of security. There is a need to be able to have more staff who are there with the process of entering and leaving from the security standpoint as well. As we go to the next slide then, speaking of security, security is something that is mission critical for everyone, whether it's students, whether it's your employees, whether it's members of the public. We all care about security. No one has a monopoly on this. We all agree the importance of security. The top one, when we talk about security strobes, so if you have a fire drill, you're gonna get an announcement, hey, we have a fire drill coming up. Maybe no announcement, maybe it's completely secret, but you still have the white flashing light to be able to do that. With other types of security events, you don't get that. And as an example, with a security strobe, it might be a blue light to say that's your light for a mass shooting drill, preferably a drill. You don't have an announcement in those situations when they are real. So you need to be able to have this light in certain areas such as music room. You're busy practicing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. You're not hearing the announcement that you need to take cover. You will see the strobe light. Cafeteria, you're in there eating food, socializing with your friends, you're not gonna hear the announcement, but you will see the light. Same thing with the gym. Same thing on the outside with our playgrounds or our places of loading for buses. If, God forbid, that type of event were to happen, and this has happened well, because we have a large sample size to work with, sadly, there have been some incidents where it happens around the time of student drop-off in other locations. You don't want that driver to be unaware of what's going on. You have that flashing light to say, get out. This is this type of incident. Leave the premises immediately. So your security strobe allows for that type of action to occur to protect our students. Another aspect involves security glazing. So security glazing is kind of an in-between of windows and bulletproof glass. It has the functionality of bulletproof glass for far cheaper. And what it does is it makes sure that person on the outside, that armed gunman, is not able to harm those who are on the inside of the building. Instead, it somewhat shatters in a way, but it doesn't break down. And this was obviously discussed within the group, widely agreed upon. The issue is making sure you're very intentional with it, very purposeful for where it goes. It serves a great purpose, and there's a value gained of protecting all those who are in the building. The limitation is you can't use it everywhere. You cannot surround the entire building with this, because while it is fantastic at stopping that type of security event, if your event instead is a fire, you can't break the glass to get out. So fire departments actually are not really a fan of this type of glass for that purpose, but everyone is a fan of the fact that you are protecting those who are in the building. So your areas of flow of traffic, front entrances are a prime example. Many of the sites in the building throughout the district already have this, but not all. So this is, again, making sure that all of our facilities have these needs, have these items, because, again, they're widely agreed upon. Next slide, please. A final item that we kind of had a group activity where we were writing on postcards, final ideas, and try to get across themes that we had. Transparency, meeting the needs of students. One of the other themes was planning, having a long-term plan. So this is our second iteration of a facilities group over the last couple of years. And there has been a tremendous amount of work by administration, by members of the public, and the board already has acted upon the work of the CDT last time around. Brookview was expanded. You just approved dollars to bring ALC here. You already did the improvements to bring transitions program up to where it needs to be to meet the needs of those students. Those were all part of the CDT. So now we're kind of in, the next phase, and Sarah discussed those immediate needs, those mission critical needs of expansion of Oakland. Actually, I talked about that. Sarah talked about our 2 elementaries. Those are our mission critical needs along with these security upgrades. Our long range plan is to identify, look, this may not be on the bond this time around, but let's document it. The work has been done, it's been vetted. Let's document it so we know moving forward, what are things that we can check off with maybe board approved funds? What are things that maybe next time around we need to make sure we can do? And as a prime example, Early Childhood Learning Center in the southern part of the district. It is a need. And luckily, if the bond were to pass, you do have some flexibility with the two new elementaries in that there would be some short-term capacity for potentially additional preschool and early childhood activities in those buildings until they fill up. Now, they will fill up, so your buffer is not infinite, but you have a bit of a buffer to determine how best can this need be met in terms of getting an early childhood in the southern end of the district. Creating more equitable learning spaces across the district. This was discussed thoroughly as well. Prime example is gymnasiums. Not all elementaries have a full-size gym. Some do, some don't. And in terms of the impact to students, that you're essentially saying, well, to this phy ed teacher, you need to work with what you have, smaller space, smaller storage often. But you, Billy and Joe, and Jill, who are boundaried over here, you get to have a better one. That's not equitable. Now, there's a reason for it. Buildings come and go over time. Building design changes. It's not equitable. And that was identified as something that needs to be resolved long-term. It's also a community space. Those gyms are used by the community in the evening, and it's a tremendous asset for the public. Superintendent Funk talked about that earlier, that we are partners with the community, and your gym spaces are one of those opportunities. Flexible learning spaces, it's been talked about thoroughly already by 2 of my colleagues here. Not all buildings have flexible learning spaces, but there are going to be opportunities for how you can start to integrate those into your buildings. It's your furniture, it's also your room design. And those flexible learning spaces allow you to meet your students, our students, where they are at. Whether it's your push-in, your pull-out, your interventions, your co-teaching, your dual teaching. There are so many variables that can impact what learning looks like on any given day. And those flexible learning spaces allow you to meet your students. Natural light, talked about during the CDT as well, came up again today when you got to see the visuals of the school in Hugo. Do it, sounds good. So on the next one, providing a new shared student and community space at the high school. The example there, an auditorium, that was vetted in the CDT, it got brought up again here. Is it a mission critical for the question on the bond? We didn't get to that point. Your survey may show otherwise, but it is something to identify for that long-range plan. Right now, that facility does not meet the capacity needs of your fantastic music programs and your theater programs. That is a good thing that you're busting at the seams. However, you can't have it at your own school. So that, again, good, but that would be an example of that type of shared space that is for the students and it's for the community. And there could be other opportunities as well for maybe future down the road surveys show here's an additional need. This long-range plan, it's not static. Here are things for now. Maybe in 5 years there's something else that is identified to go with it. Last item, making sure that within your buildings, our buildings, that there's the proper cameras in terms of quantity and ability. And again, that rolls into your security component overall. But that would be the last slide, and the four of us, along with, I'm sure, staff, are ready and able to answer all questions.
We are, and before we get started, I just want to thank the four of our team members who are here tonight, as well as the other 20 or so members that came to all of our meetings. They did an amazing job. As you saw, they really dug deep into this and feel like they have a really strong recommendation to bring forward. So thank you to all of you and to the rest of your team.
Yes, I thank you all, and I think you were all repeat, right? You were all, or were you new to the group? Okay. Many of you were, so thank you, because I know that's a long span of time here, so thank you for that. I think that's invaluable, though, to have people new and fresh, but then also that have been engaged in the work for a long time, too. So I can open it up to, I don't know if Superintendent Funk, if you have any comments you want to add, or we can just go to questions, or.
You know, we talk about partnering with our community. This is a great example. So
Yep.
thank you for your long hours and time over, you know, a number of years doing this. And appreciate your common sense recommendation here to the school board. So thank you.
Great. Any questions? Yes, Director Petrie.
Thank you all so much for everything. This is a huge amount of work, but you know, you have laid the table for us, and it's hugely important that you did that, you know, shoe leather work for us, because it helps us make better decisions. I want to just ask you about the consensus that you reached on this set of recommendations. Can you characterize that? How strong was that consensus?
There was a process involving how well do you understand and have the ability to go along with this, and there was a hand signal with numbers, and everyone present indicated that they have the ability to go forward with it and help to present to others to support it. The numbers went up to 5, 3, 4, and 5 were, 3 was the threshold. Most everyone was at a 4 or a 5. There were a couple that had a 3. 2 and below was considered, might need to talk it over a bit more, but no one was at that level. It was unanimous in that support.
It's tough to make some of these decisions because we've been in those facilities, we've looked at them, we understand what the need is, and to say, no, we're not going to do that right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's challenging. I mean, there was members of the community from all parts of the community, and so, you know, you want to do something for everybody, right? You want to cover all the schools, you want to do all those things, but there is a tax impact, so you got to think through that.
Yeah.
Try and protect it. It was one of our guiding priorities, and so. I would also comment, just looking back to the CDT back in the, several years ago, we had fairly strong consensus on that as well. I know it was maybe discussed in a slightly different manner, but there was strong consensus the first time through as well. So we built on that.
Thank you.
Can you speak a little bit to when you went to the White Bear Lake School? Because I know some people are probably thinking 1,000+ person school in Lake Elmo. Do you have reservations? I mean, could you visualize that school growing even a little bit more and still feeling like it was an intimate experience for students and families?
Yeah, I also went to that, and being a Brookview parent, it really did not feel any bigger than Brookview.
Okay.
If that gives you any sort of sense of it, because they've got the little pods where, yes, the overall footprint of the building might be big, but the experience for the individual student isn't that big, especially when you have things co-located so that the kids aren't having to go, you know, down the 8th mile hallway to get to the gym, where everything is kind of based around the shared amenities. It's not such a trip. They don't feel like they're in a huge school because their experience within that larger building is pretty small.
Thank you. Yes, Director Kelsenberg.
Yeah, so looking at 2 slides, the top priorities, and this very well could be very similar to a bond issue this fall. And then the projected cost, I just lost it here, was $195 million, the survey would say. How closely are those aligned? Would that pay for what we're seeing in the slide above?
Yes.
Completely, or?
It would pay for the recommendations completely.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So thank you for all the work, because that's a lot. There's a lot there. And I don't think, I mean, it doesn't feel like any of those recommendations they don't feel controversial, on their face. Everybody would love to have the school like the one in Hugo. Our elementary schools would be great if all the children could experience that. Thinking about it as a bond issue, thinking about the decisions that families make when they have to part with their money, and we talk about equity across the district, and you address that in the long-range plans to an extent. I'm just trying to think about how do you, and I think about schools in particular like maybe Lily Lake, Afton Lakeland, that have that more older format, the older buildings that may feel shorted. Not so. I'm not even talking about like gym space. I'm talking about the flexible learning spaces. Ideas about how does the community accept that? How do you?
Couple thoughts there. So, we're talking about a bond to meet the needs of our growth. And so you're seeing the shiny new stuff to meet those needs. The other thing that we have in the district, and I think you can use Stonebridge as an example right now, is we have long-term facilities revenue that we receive from the Department of Education that we are in the process right now of doing some pretty significant renovations to Stonebridge for their classrooms, modifying them to be more modern. And so in June, Mark will be coming to you with his 10-year plan for long-term facilities. And so as part of that, we will be able to use some of that revenue to update some of the buildings in the other parts of the district that are not being addressed by the the immediate recommendations of the team here. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Well, it does. Yeah, I think it's helpful to be able to give that type of information to the community as we're talking about moving forward with the bonding. That we're trying to bring all of the students along.
Correct.
Yes, it's pretty. The new buildings are pretty, and that's great. But
So we have a plan for that, and Mark will be presenting some information in June on that.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
May I also, we spent a fair amount of time talking about how best to approach this in terms of the community and the willingness to pass a bond at this time. And we talked about whether or not we should have sort of something for everybody. If everybody sort of got something, would we have more of a chance of passing this bond? But when you start to get something for everybody, that price goes up so much higher, and the willingness of, the data has shown that there's a top, right, for what people are willing to pay. And when we started thinking about sort of the needs versus the wants or the nice to haves, it became apparent, I think, a pretty strong consensus to stick with the needs and not try to have something for everybody right away at this time.
Part of it was, again, related to urgency, right? Yeah. And this whole idea of time, and if we put more things into it and the number goes up, there's higher risk, maybe it gets rejected. And for us, that wasn't really, I think, an acceptable risk as you thought about the schools need to be built.
Yeah, it came down to capacity and safety were the two
driving
factors.
Director Hockert?
Thank you. To echo everyone else, thank you so much for all your work. You guys really put in a lot of time and effort, and your thoughtful presentation really showed all the work that you guys collaborated and created for us. So I also appreciate how much of your presentation really reflected the community survey and other voices outside of the group that you guys were actually working in. So it wasn't just you guys. And our conversations at the board table, I mean, it's all coming together, and it's really fun to see that. A couple things that I would just like to comment on. I really appreciate all the visuals and helping us kind of see the potential of where this could go for Afton Lake, for Anderson, for Lake Elmo, thank you. That's what I'm like, why am I forgetting? In Oakland, there's a lot of options. And having those visuals really kind of helps it all come together. And also the visit to the school and it's really exciting to see how we can really support a learning environment that will help our kids learn in a 21st century way. So all really exciting stuff. I also appreciate keeping in mind that tax tolerance and kind of circling back to the previous questions here. I'm curious, how long will these, if everything passes as the package goes through tonight, how long is this going to get us? Because I know that we have lots of ideas, lots of wants, and some very urgent needs. So I'm just trying to play it forward of when are we going to get to a point where though we're going to have new needs real fast, especially looking at those projected numbers going up. So anyone want to stab at how long this is going to get us? If we get a decade, 10 years out of this? Okay.
Yeah, it was designed to be 10 years. Then we have, I always smile, look at Jeff, because Jeff's from Lake Elmo. And
Lake Elmo. But Lake Elmo may be a factor.
yeah, but we do know that the growth is coming. So as the architects say, you can plan pretty confidently 5-10 years out, but know that this is certainly not the final plan. We will definitely be making adjustments and coming back, just as we had to do with the CDT's original recommendation. Things are changing, and we'll have to be adapting.
And just for clarification really quick, because I know that people love visuals, but then they think that's what you're recommending. I mean, nothing's been designed. We're not talking about emulating the White Bear Lake facility. That'll be a partnership done with community members, staff, students,
Yeah, the
the
architects
board.
did a lot of explaining that to this group too, is
Okay.
that, we're giving you some ideas, but really the processes and why it takes so long to get these buildings is once a bond were to be approved, that's when you really start to sit down with the people that are going to be in this space and talk to families, to students, to staff about what they need and how they want the building to work. And as we saw in White Bear, they had a very specific design and philosophy for how they wanted the building. We will have something similar with our own staff and our community. So it's exciting that the community really gets to come along to help design these spaces.
Perfect. Director Petrie?
Yes, a question and a comment. I'm going back to the total student enrollment, that graph, back in the beginning, the red line and the blue line. And the question that I have about the red line, which represents tremendous growth. I mean, if you're talking about us adding 2,000 students to an 8,000 student district, that's huge growth in a relatively short period of time, in 10 years. Does that red line represent just mostly growth in the area, or does that represent us trying to increase our capture rate? Is it both of those things?
Yep.
Okay.
It is both.
Okay. And is that a significant increase in
I think
capture
it's,
rate?
I think our capture rate's at 72% right now, and that's an increase of 75%.
Okay. All right. Okay. And then just a comment, I really appreciate the fact that you went and toured the Hugo Elementary School, because I think that we sort of think about and understand kind of up here that education has changed, and that the kind of education that Lake Elmo and Anderson were built for 100 years ago is just not the way education happens these days. And Molly, you as a teacher probably understand that better than most. And I kind of even know this, but looking at what they are doing over there in Hugo is kind of remarkable, the way they are incorporating technology and allowing that to help the individualization of learning. And I'm just fascinated by the fact that these teachers can work together so cooperatively, and I wonder how much training goes into being able to teach in a facility like that. Anybody know?
We actually talked about it a lot.
We did talk about it, and I think the only, the danger of this conversation now is that we're not promising that we're going to go in that direction as a district.
Right.
But it was
I
really
get
an
that.
interesting conversation, because the principal there said, we talked with people who want to work in this collaborative environment. People specifically, they knew what they were getting into when they signed on to work at the new school, and they have worked on consensus building and on conflict resolution with staff members. So, we think about doing that with our students, but the principal said, there's actually a fair amount of conversation that goes into training staff to work in this sort of a collaborative environment. It didn't go unnoticed in our conversations.
He also explained that this is also part of a larger initiative of the district, that this is the spear of the new way the district wants to go. So that school is sort of the
Like
the
piloting, or the
piloting
pioneers, if
where
you
they
will, yeah.
want the rest of the district to go, which
It's a really interesting observation.
Even if we went a little bit in that direction, I mean, it is so visceral walking through Lake Elmo Elementary or Anderson Elementary and then walking through that school. And you're just like, I don't know, there's so many emotions tied to it because you think about our students and our children going to those schools, and then you go to that and you just experiencing it. You're like, I mean, talk about equity inside of our district. Think of us compared to that district, right? It's just like, it kind of blows you. I don't know if you guys had that same reaction, but it was stunning in a way, really.
I think stunning would be a very good word. I mean, in my day job, I visit schools across the state, so I see vastly different designs and dates of when they've been built. And honestly, the school in Hugo, in terms of, they're obviously making a very strategic choice for how instruction is going to occur and their relationships with staff. The design, hypothetically, if we get to that point, you can still have that design and not have the shared classrooms. 833, when they built 3 new elementaries in 1991, went to that style. But they're not shared classrooms. They have a pod style with inner spaces for your specialist, but it's still their own classroom. They're not going to this next level. So that's your choice. That is an administration decision as to what works best with your staff from an instructional standpoint. But I would agree with Graham, but especially with Lake Elmo, I'll go there to volunteer various times, and when I will see like a student in the hallway for a pullout, that's not okay. That's not fair to the student. It's not fair to the teacher whatsoever. And this is our staff. It's certainly not fair to the students who are walking by. We actually had a good discussion on privacy. Like, that matters. And I think we as a group overall firmly stated, like, there are certain expectations we have as community members, as parents, as taxpayers. And this is a step to make sure that we are meeting those expectations. And that to me matters.
So, go ahead.
I had another comment, but I'll slip this one in here because it kind of fits. So before this meeting started, we were viewing the new ALC space, and I was talking to the gentleman from Wold. I said, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of obviously nice, but I bet there's a lot of things that we don't know, but there's a reason for them. So then I compare what he told me to what I saw in the Hugo school. A lot of it might, on the surface, look kind of whimsical. It's like, oh, this, but there's a lot of reason and a lot of science between all those curves, those colors, the glass, the furniture, and I think that would be good to be noted that it's none of that's extravagant. There's reasons for all of that.
Colors are a prime example. Like that's a specific intentional choice. The furniture, it's flexible furniture because it now has more than just one utility. You can use it in different ways. There are students who have specific needs where they work better on a different piece of furniture. There are students who, with their IEPs, they might need a specific type of piece of furniture to sit on because that helps them. So you are exactly right. Like those aren't just, throw a dart on the board and pick a color.
Right.
And then here's all the choices for furniture. Well, that one looks spectacular. No, it's very intentional.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, because I guess and if you have a question, because I know you haven't spoken, so if this gets ahead of where you're at,
please do.
Then let me know. But I guess I wanted to know kind of next steps. We have these recommendations. Where do we go from here? I know that, we talked about another survey, just to kind of gauge, again, the different priorities and where, we want to make sure the community's with us, right? And one thing I do here is, I hate letting these additional priorities go. Are we going to be maybe talking to the community about how, I see security and I see cameras. That just kills me if that was on a second, bond in 10 years. Are we going to ask more about that and see where the community is at? Next
Well,
steps.
I can speak to the very next step is a community survey. So we have been working with a consultant to draft that survey. They'll be making phone calls right away after Memorial Day, and we should have results mid-June. I believe we have a special study session scheduled with the board for June 22nd, where you will hear those results. As part of the survey, we are testing the recommendation from the facilities planning group as kind of a question one. And then some of those additional recommendations that they have for the future, we're putting out there as maybe a potential question two to see if there's interest from the community. And we'll get a really good sense from that survey to revisit the tax tolerance that we did in the first survey, see if that still is in line with what people are thinking, and test out these specific projects to see what kind of support there is. So that information will be coming before you have to make any more decisions as far as a bond. On the June 27th school board meeting is when we would come forward with an actual recommendation for you as far as what a referendum could be.
Okay.
Did I miss anything, Mike?
And we'll ask for your approval to move forward for a bond on June 27th.
Okay. And I love the idea of a survey that, because I do hear from community members that they want the ability to see what these additional needs might cost and what that would put the bond at. And so, great. Yes, Director Thielander.
Well, I just want to extend my gratitude to all of you and the entire committee. So did a masterful job working within kind of the framework of some budgetary constraints provided by some previous discussions. So thank you all. A couple things stood out. Molly having 2 elementary-age boys, the washing stations kind of funneling through there. That's man. I always tell our boys to wash their hands. But no, I think as I reflect and think about all the work that you've done and the opportunity that we have as a school district, communities, and as a school board. It's about preparing us for kind of a future-ready education. Jeff, you kind of mentioned we don't know what it's going to look like in 2030. And so how can we be future-ready and best prepare us for whatever that may look like and that we can best meet the learning needs of students at that time. So, as I kind of, balance some things within my background within personal finance, we have the responsibility to balance kind of what the needs of the students are with what the community can afford. And I think there's some economic hardships on families that we have to be real about. But I think, as we look at this, I think it's important to understand, what's the why? And for me, the why is it's about the kids and creating more equitable educational systems. And I think, as we look at what decisions have been made in the past, obviously we have to do what we have to do to get, to make things successful. But to me, and I don't mean to say this in a bad way, but it seems like there's been Band-Aids. We're always, we'll push it forward to next. We had a community design team in 2019. I mean, who predicted in, 2020 there'd be a pandemic? Mm-hmm. I didn't. And so I think life happens. I think we have this opportunity now to consider this is, I think, for a community as well as for a school board to think about, what is it that we can do, and it's always going to be the give and take relationship between taxpayers and our schools. That's never going to end. But I want to see this, and I would, encourage people to frame this as, yes, there's a cost, but really it's an investment. We're investing in our students, schools, and communities to be future ready. And I'm just excited for what that might be. 5 to 10 years from now, I mean, who knows? I mean, 10 years from now, my oldest is in college. I mean, that's crazy, and he's only 10. So it makes it really real. My 8-year-old is now graduating. But it's more than just me. It's about all future kids and all the kids in the communities. And I think, there's a lot of studies that sustained spending increases improve student outcomes, and how and to whom the spending is targeted really matters. And I think this is where, I implore the school board to think about, yes, we're being concentrated, we're focusing on these opportunities. And I guess, I know we had to work within a framework, and there's some higher priority needs. But, looking at, creating more equitable learning spaces, kind of, Chairperson Sherman, and increased security. I mean, as a parent, I'm always on board for that. And, I think even with the auditorium, I grew up in a small town with a high school of 800. And I graduated in 99. And, so we had in early to mid 90s built an auditorium that's larger than what we have in Stillwater. And we have over 3,200 kids. That blows my mind. So I think there's an opportunity that I think we really need to think about it and encourage the community to think bigger picture to make some bigger things. So I apologize for a long explanation, just some comments, but I do have a question. So we're obviously not addressing classroom size right now, but within these considerations, and maybe Dr. Fuentes, this might be something for you, regarding right now regarding building capacity, does this and what these plans do, does this give us wiggle room down the line to potentially address this, or are we potentially to be hindered in the future based on current recommendations?
Regarding
Class size.
Classroom sizes. And just considerations around, building capacity, as we, based on the proposed recommendations, are we going to have issues potentially addressing that down the line?
I don't think,
Whether or not it happens, but just having the option.
I would say not in the next 10 years.
Okay. Yep.
I mean, I could say for sure not in the next 5.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at Lake Elmo over here, just wondering. But, yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, like I said, this is phenomenal work, and good to see gauge where the community's at, and more conversations to come, more survey information. And for community members listening at home, certainly feel free to email feedback or reach out to the school board and the superintendent and share your comments. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Awesome job.
All right, our last report under this specific strategic direction is our preliminary budget update. And for that, we have Marie here. So welcome, Marie.
Good evening. So this evening, I'm going to provide a brief update on where we're at with our 2023-24 budget planning. And overall, you will see some of the influencing factors to our budget, and one being where we are currently on our 2022-23 projected versus actual. And we're taking a look at where we are on our revenue and expenditures, because that does impact fund balance and those adjustments. So we'll be coming to you at the next meeting to give an update on our year-end actuals. The other areas, enrollment, those fluctuations, of course, impact your revenue, but also capacity and the class size. Contractual settlements, and those not only with staffing or your negotiations, but also any contractual settlements with services that the district receives. Also, legislative adjustments. I think that's one of the biggest areas we've heard about the last few months. And those, again, will continue as we find out more and hear more about some of those bills. And those not only impact our revenue, they also impact expenditures and the planning there that continue into the next few years. Also, bond ratings. The better your bond ratings are, the better you have on the results of your bonds and the interest. And so that has long-term impacts on what you just heard about for a potential levy. Also, funding that's one time only. There are a lot of considerations there, along with funding that potentially expires after a given time period. A lot of those grants. One of the largest areas we had to consider this year was the federal COVID-19 funding and where those investments were across the district, and how that funding, approximately $2.3 million for just the current fiscal year, where that was and how that was embedded across programs, and looking at how the district either sustains or continues those programs, and looking at that. And then last but not least, and there's many more, inflation. And that's one of the biggest pieces as you look at a general fund and just the past couple of years, how we've seen that grow, and looking at the overall costs for the district. So what you'll see on this next slide is more the general fund highlighting the big picture. And you can see our current revised budget, where the general fund currently is for revenue. And if you look at the first two rows, the revenue and the use of our restricted fund balance, you add those together, and then the expenditures for a balanced budget. And so we had currently $128.2 million plus the use of our restricted fund balance, about $5.8 million. Most of that was for our project activity in both long-term facilities maintenance funding and our operating capital for projects that are going on in the district. If you take a look at our preliminary budget for next year, you will see about 137.1 that is estimated for revenue for the general fund. And then we're planning to use about $2 million in our operating capital reserve restricted fund balance, which is different than your unassigned. Just wanted to highlight that. And again, that's for project activity. And so you will see that difference there. And then on the expenditure side, I just want to highlight some of the areas that were considered. Again, I highlight that we had the federal, just again, the ESSER, ARP funding on the expenditure side. Also those materials and service contracts, really looking at that expenditure activity. Other investments in our staffing across all programs and schools, making sure that we had appropriate levels, but also the operations. You have fixed costs across the district, and I'll just highlight utilities. Those had differing inflationary factors, but also our projects and what's going on, not only current, but as we look to the future. So just making sure that we're planning appropriately for those projects and adjusting as accordingly. So that highlights right now our big picture. We will get into more detail as we're refining our budget before June for you. What I did want to highlight on the next slide is some of the preliminary results of the revenue from the legislature. And again, that is included in that revenue amount on the previous slide. But I wanted to highlight some of those that we were able to calculate, one being the general ed formula increase. And again, that's just shy of 2.5 million. And again, that is just for next year. There are formulas that continue for some of these bills, either a 2-year cycle or future cycles. The English learner cross subsidy based on our per pupil allowance and the pupil units that we have for next year is about 170,000. And then our student support personnel aid, this is a brand new a funding source. It's just shy of $12 per adjusted pupil unit. That's about 106,000. And then school library aid funding is about $16 per adjusted pupil unit. That's again about 143,000. And then pupil transportation, there's some different formulas you have to look in there. One of them being sparsity funding that's embedded in a formula of unreimbursed transportation costs. And that formula provides about $131,000. There's some embedded other pieces in the language that we'll continue to review. Operating capital, there was also an adjustment of $2 per adjusted pupil unit for the menstrual products and opiate antagonists. So that is a restricted category within the operating capital budget. And then special ed, the cross subsidy, one of the largest formula adjustments, again, increased to 44%. There's future years also, just highlighting that estimated amount because it is based on your spend in special education. So that would be the estimated amount for next year. And so you can see about $7.8 million of additional revenue. And again, this is not an all-inclusive list. So I'll just say it's subject to change. I'm interpreting this based on what I can see. But it also comes with just a caution that those cost estimates also, there may be some mandated pieces in there on the expenditure side. And our revenue for the unemployment and the paid family medical leave bills, that revenue estimate and expenditure estimate are still, they're not included, along with there's a lot others in the bill yet in that file. So again, as we know, we're going to just keep updating you.
Thank you.
On that information. And it's kind of a budget, again, as a living document, and we'll keep updating you. Again, the timeline before you. So on June 13th, we'll continue to provide information at the study session and go into some more information on the budget update. And then on the 27th, that's when we'll present the best estimate on our preliminary budget for final board approval. And that will be the budget that's adopted for our July 1 operations.
Great.
So
Thank
with
you.
that's all I have for this evening.
Are there questions for Marie? Yes.
So is that a normal timeline? You know, the 27th, that's a couple days before we actually start that budget.
By statute, you have to have a budget approved by June 30th, so that's fine.
Okay.
I'm assuming that the work of, like, the cost of the mandates versus the revenue coming in, that's all ongoing and.
We're not going to know, really, until we see what our summer unemployment looks like.
Okay.
So that's going to be, it's a shot in the dark.
I mean,
at
this is a
point.
challenge. Yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
So we may be making some budget revisions over the year, and
Right.
that's what you do.
And more so maybe this year.
So on that, will we know that summer number before we approve the budget in June, or are you saying it'll be
You will not know
later?
that.
We will not.
We will not
Okay.
know it, no. So we will, again, we do, the board does revisions to the budget multiple times throughout the year, so.
I mean, I can't imagine any school district's going to really know
No,
the
they
impact
won't.
of that. No one's going to know,
Right.
so, right? Yeah. I appreciate this. This is very helpful. All right. Thank you, Marie. All right. We have our next strategic direction, ensure the learning process is adaptable to meet individual student needs. And under that, we have an action item for a curriculum purchase. Dr. Drexler Booth is here to talk K through 5 science, which the board has seen in a report format. So this is just simply acting on that recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Sherman, Directors of the Board, Superintendent Funk. As was mentioned, I had shared with you last month the culminating work of our Elementary Science Curriculum Committee and their discernment process, which led us to the Smithsonian Science for the Classroom set of curricular materials. So just a quick review, adopting Smithsonian Science for the Classroom will ensure that consistency in science instruction across the district. It will provide opportunities for students to develop that deep questioning and inquiry skills. It will provide hands-on exploration and real-world application of science content. And it will be able to teach students to analyze and interpret data and make conclusions in their conversations from evidence. So we're excited about this opportunity for these materials and for the shift and change in our instruction. So we have reached out to Smithsonian around purchase details. And in working with them, we will be asking you to approve a 6-year purchase agreement. We'll be able to add replacement and consumable materials to extend that implementation in future years, but right now it's a 6-year purchase agreement that we're looking at. With that, every teacher in grades K through 3 will get their own set of materials, so they won't be sharing across classrooms. And Amigos Unidos K-5 will be doing that as well. At 4th and 5th grade, our staff departmentalize, and so generally there's one teacher teaching science per grade per school. So we'll have enough materials for every student to engage in the work, but generally speaking, one teacher will be providing that instruction at 4th and 5th grade. And then professional development is always a question that we get when we're talking about a new set of materials and a new learning system. So as part of this, as part of a gratis item, Smithsonian through Carolina Biological Company will supply 29 trainers to provide professional development. So essentially one person on one day is one trainer. So we'll utilize on our professional development days in the upcoming year about 9 trainers. So we'll be able to plan additional years of trainers built into this model or provide additional training not on professional development days. But each of our three of our days next year will have trainers, and it will take about 3 trainers to cover the full, all 6 grades. So the purchase details on this, curriculum materials get to be pretty expensive pretty quickly, especially when we're looking at the scope of this work. So the total cost for the 6 years comes to $920,000. It does fit within our budget. We have worked with Smithsonian in Carolina to split those payments over multiple years. So we will pay for the first $7,000 based on the initial implementers that we've been running this spring. So we'll pay that part of the bill, this year's budget. And then the remainder will be split across the next 2 fiscal years. $503,000 next year and then $409,000 in the year after. So with that, I would entertain any questions and ask you to approve this purchase.
So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the purchase. Can I get a second, and then we'll allow for questions? Do you
I
want
can
a
second it.
Okay,
Yep, that's
Director
fine.
Hockert will second. Just before, because I know you had a question.
Yep, go ahead.
And I did not email you this, but I kind of want to just give the community a little bit of background. When do you remember when the last time science curriculum was purchased in our district?
So we've been operating with the full option science sequence, our science system, FOSS, for a number of years. So we can track purchase orders back as far as 2012 and even earlier. I think after my last presentation, I got some emails from teachers saying, oh, I've been here since 1999 and we've had a version of FOSS. So when these current materials that we've had, some have a copyright date of 2014. I saw earlier purchases that go beyond that. So we may have updated the versions, but we've been with the FOSS science system for more than a decade.
Right. And so I guess for me, it's important to remember that when Dr. Funk came in and really advised the board, curriculum, professional development, staffing, that is directly having the lack of investment in those areas, you get the results that you get without an investment in those core areas. And so I'm pleased as a board, I'm going to obviously be supporting this tonight, because this is the first time we have the opportunity to invest in something that is going to directly, positively impact the academic achievement of our students. And so I just think it's important for the community to recognize that curriculum has not been something we've put a lot of money into as a board. Director Hocker, you had a question?
Actually, my question kind of tags right into that. Looking at, well, two-parter. Looking at these payments, are we getting all the curriculum the first year, or is it going to be phased in over the payment years?
So we will receive all of the core materials that teachers would need to implement for the first 3 years. And so that includes the primary kit and then the replacement materials. So we'll receive, they call it a 3-use kit. And so each teacher will receive a 3-use kit, which we will store in that box. So the next year, those teachers will be able to unpack those materials and be able to use them. Then in 3 years, when it's time to receive new replacement materials, we'll have a voucher system that will work with them. In addition to that, there are live specimen and other deliveries that will be made throughout the year, things like mealworms, and it's going to be fun in our classrooms. But so we'll be able to, through a voucher system, receive those when they're needed.
So I have a second part of that question. I'm glad that it's going to be implemented kind of right away, because then I'm looking at, like, when can we expect to see the impact of this new curriculum kind of bearing out in the data going forward? I believe I've heard in the past that it takes a little while to kind of get the PD underway, get teachers up to speed on the curriculum, so the data may not be immediately showing up in next year, even though we have the curriculum going next year.
Sure.
So can you give us an idea of how long that might take?
Yeah, so first thing to point out, the new Minnesota Science Standards aligned with the national next generation science standards present a significant instructional shift. And we've talked about that over the last year and a half. And so I do anticipate the professional development need in that area to be high. Teachers will engage with instructional coaches and with our science coordinator and with Smithsonian trainers to develop and refine their skills. So you often will find an implementation dip in data. That is not unusual. Frankly, I'm not sure what that's going to look like with this year's, with next year's MCAs. It's important to note as well that we are implementing these new materials in advance of the new MCA science test. So the MCA, would it be 4 probably if we're counting the numbers? The next MCA will be administered in the spring of 2005. So we wanted to get ahead. What did I say, 2005?
2005.
Okay, time machine. 2025, 2025. So we're implementing early because the test is administered in 5th grade, and it covers grades 3 through 5. So we wanted our students to be engaging in the new science standards at 3rd grade, 4th grade in advance of that test, so that they have had the new science standards, the new form of instruction with the new materials in advance of the new test. So I would anticipate that when the new test emerges, we'll have a true baseline without an implementation dip. Those standards they're not significantly different in terms of some of the content pieces of the MCA 3. However, there is going to be perhaps a slight gap misalignment with the current MCA test. However, the instruction that our teachers will be providing in the content, I think it will be a much more robust set of instructional philosophy and framework than we currently have.
My answer, 2 years.
There you go.
Okay, but with the caveat, as Caleb just mentioned, 25 will be a different test, so that'll start again. But in my experience, when you're adopting a new curriculum, at the end of year 2, you should start to see gains.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So previously, was it earlier this year or late last year, you made a pretty comprehensive presentation on this. is this pretty much the same thing? So what we'd be approving now is what you described previously?
Yeah, so the last month, I presented on the Smithsonian Science, and we went into more details on what the materials were, and so that is this system.
So more recently than I was thinking, but yes, you'd made that presentation.
Last spring, I did share with
Standards.
what is that implementation shift, the instructional shift that's taking place, and what's the systematic response. So I shared some middle school components. I shared what we were thinking at the time around elementary, but we hadn't identified this yet. This was a process that we went through this entire year to get to this point.
Thank you. Director Petrie?
Just a quick clarification question. So it says it's a 6-year purchase, but that doesn't represent the lifetime of this curriculum in this district, correct? We probably don't even know how long that might be, but you would probably still need to buy consumables.
Correct.
But are there textbooks involved that would last the lifetime of the curriculum?
Yeah, so so every classroom will receive at least four bins of materials, and so that includes the non-consumable science hardware that would be able to be reused year after year after year into the life of the program, replacing pieces as they wear out or break. There are reading materials that are part of that kit as well. And so those are not a hardcover text. They do have a tougher binder than normal paperback. So it should have a longer life. However, that is a resource that kids are going to be using over and over and over. And especially in those departmentalized classes, it's one kit, one set of materials that every class then will engage in. And so I will foresee some wear and tear on some of those pieces that will need to be replaced. The primary piece that extends the life of the program are the refurbishment kits. So as we extend to 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, hopefully within 12 we'll identify a new resource perhaps. We'll certainly have new standards every 10 years that we want to be responsive to. But we should be able to, through refurbishments, extend this as long as we need.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the updated curriculum for K through 5 science, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Caleb. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to move on. Then we have 2 reports left. Our first one is our high school schedule considerations. And we are welcoming Principal Bach for that.
Good evening, Director Sherman, Superintendent Funk, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about high school schedules, and I will do my best to give you an overview of a couple of different options that exist. We'll kind of talk through some of the pros and cons potentially that we see potentially for students on each of those schedules, and that may give you a sense of whether this is something that you would want to prioritize going forward, because certainly there are implications kind of across the board for how we would choose to proceed. The current reality is, I'm sure all of you are aware, we are on a 6-period day schedule. We're on a semester schedule. So that means that we have 2 grading periods and 6 periods during each of those grading times. I tried to go back and give you a little bit of historical context. That whole slide probably needs an asterisk next to it because that's my best attempt in going through kind of the oracles that exist at Stillwater Area High School and going through the student information systems to look at transcripts and high school transcripts and what they've looked like historically. And this is what I think we've kind of come up with. Our current 6-period day schedule has been in existence since it looks like about 2005, 2006. The one caveat to that is during 2020 and 2021, when we had the COVID year, we had a hybrid schedule where we adjusted things quite a bit. And we ran what was essentially a modified block schedule where we kind of went 3 classes each quarter. So there were 3 classes on a 9-week period. And so there was one little kind of hiccup in there. Prior to 2005, 2006, the high school was on a 5-period trimester day, known as a 5x3. And that schedule looks like it was in existence for a couple of years. And prior to that, which looks like right around 2001, 2002, there was a 7-period day that was in place. And again, I'll talk about one or two of those in some upcoming slides. And there's some variation in terms of how you could run just about any of those schedules kind of going forward. Our current reality at the high school is with our 6.2 or our 6x2 schedule. If you were to outline pros and cons, which again I'm going to do on some of these other schedules, the pros are the opportunities that we see. The first one that stands out is if you look at the sheer number of minutes that a student would be in a class on a 6x2 schedule, the number of minutes in each class is probably maxed out on a 6x2 schedule. So our students have more seat time in each class. So if we're talking about, our ability to get through each of the standards, and again, I think if you ask most of our teachers, I think most of us would probably argue our standards are so comprehensive, we still struggle to find time to meet all of them or get all of them in or figure out equitably how to address all of those pieces. But the reality is we have more seat time on our current schedule. The other opportunity, quite honestly, probably comes into play more so for you and from your lens than just about anyone else's cost. It's the most efficient schedule that's on the books. Just about any other kind of schedule is probably going to cost more money. Again, it has nothing to do with academics, but from a cost standpoint, this is about the cheapest thing that's on the books. The challenges that we have, number one, our students have 6 classes at a time to manage, whereas on some of these other schedules that we'll talk about, again, if there's fewer classes, sometimes that really resonates with a number of our learners. Their ability to kind of focus in and lock in on a smaller number of classes helps them kind of process through, and we'll talk about that a little bit. The other two biggies that pop up for us are, as you can see on the top bullet there, there's a limited number of elective opportunities. I've spoken to this board on previous occasions, or previous boards, I should say, and we've kind of thrown out a number of different times the kind of classic example of your 4-year college-bound student who needs 4 years of core classes, probably needs 4 years of a world language, and if they're interested in music, that becomes their whole high school schedule. And they don't have the opportunity to take a business class or an art class or experiment with something that just happens to be of interest to them. They get locked in very, very quickly. The other piece is, sounds kind of similar, but that last bullet there talks about the increased number of required credits. If you look at our current schedule right now, we have 43 credits that are required, or students are required to have 43 credits in the bank in order to graduate. Of those 43 credits, 32 of them are in required areas. That's a really high percentage, and it's actually slightly even higher than what's mandated by MDE in the state of Minnesota. And what that means is that theoretically, some students could graduate with only 11 elective courses on their schedule. And so when you figure 11 electives out of 43 that are required, that's about 25% of their schedule would be electives. Some of these other schedules that we'll talk about are up around 33%, some of them even as high as up to 38%, where again, kids have an opportunity to take all kinds of different things and experiment with things in high school, which is part of what high school should be about. We're not asking kids to pick a major at age 15 years old when they wind up coming in. This is designed to be experimental so that they get a sense of kind of who they are and what they might want to pursue when they're done with high school. We sat down and had a lot of conversation as a staff a couple of weeks ago, and we talked when it became apparent that the board might be interested in just entertaining this discussion and considering this. I engaged our staff in some conversation around what a schedule change might mean. And the question was kind of framed that, hey, if the board were interested in entertaining a schedule change, what are the goals that we would like to see? What are the outcomes that why would we do this? And what would we hope to see as a result? There were 3 key themes that emerged for us. First and foremost, as we just got done talking about, other schedules would allow students to explore more electives and more opportunities. And so that's certainly a key theme that resonates with our staff, and our staff recognizes the limitations of our current schedule. Another key theme that emerged was the idea of flexibility within that schedule for both students and staff. And really what that means is finding things to do with time. As one example of that, all of you are familiar with the office hours concept that we're running. That's a very flexible piece that's designed to be as responsive and as targeted as we can to student need. Some schedules lend themselves to creative outlets like that, maybe a little bit better than others. And so again, if there are schedules that allow for those kinds of opportunities, that's something that we would hope could be maximized if this is a direction that we'd like to go. And then lastly, another really key theme that emerged was somehow trying to tie this in to the mental health needs of our students that we see. I'm going to be a little bit careful here because I am not aware of research that is definitive that says if you have a different schedule with fewer classes, that automatically leads to lower levels of stress and things like that. So I'm not going to go that far. However, I will say that there's any number of qualitative pieces, both in academic journals and even within our own district, that seem to purport the idea that when you have fewer class periods during the course of a day, there's a less chaotic feel to school. There is a correlation between behavior issues and things that happen because there's fewer transition times built into the course of your day. There's a more calming effect that students tend to feel. And again, I was just reading an article literally today in NEA, the National Educators Association magazine, that talked about schools on the block schedule, for example, and how, again, there's this calming effect on students. There's fewer behavior issues, things that they have to manage and triage during the course of the day. And again, qualitatively, from our own lens, we did a fair amount of survey work during the COVID year in 2020 and 2021, where we reached out to students and staff and just said, hey, tell us your perceptions. Again, how scientific you want to equate that. The bottom line is there was some qualitative feedback there that came back that said, yes, we did appreciate the idea of a more condensed piece, so for what that's worth. It just allows us more time to be able to dig deeper into the content. And again, this is something that when you talk about if you have fewer class periods, you lengthen out the amount of time. That was an idea that resonated with our staff, the idea that then they can give students an opportunity to really get deep into a subject as opposed to feeling like you've just got to hop from one thing to the next to try to cover all of these standards. So as a couple of examples, again, I'm just going to break down a couple of them for you, give you a rough sense, and please understand the minutes here are rough. This is just to give you a ballpark estimate of what this might look like, not drill down into specifics. But a 4x4 block schedule. This is kind of what's known as a traditional block schedule. A traditional block schedule would probably be like a 4-period day where each period is roughly between 85 to 90 minutes in length. Again, currently on our 6-period day, each of our class periods is 53 minutes. So again, it's probably time and a half for each of the class periods that's there. You have a lunch break somewhere in between. The opportunities for this, so the reasons that we might want to look at a schedule like this are from a math standpoint, this increases your electives, and I'll explain that a little bit on the next slide. Depth versus breadth, again, with the extended class periods, it gives you and your kids an opportunity to delve a little bit deeper into something. The class periods there might lend themselves better to project or lab-oriented activities or experiential learning kinds of things. And then again, as we talked about, there's fewer transitions during the course of the day. It gives kids an opportunity to kind of settle into each of those class periods. Challenges with a schedule like this, I mentioned the number of minutes earlier. If you add up the number of minutes that are on a schedule like this, you will lose minutes in each class. And so we would have, if we were to examine a schedule like this, we would certainly have to have a lot of conversation as a staff around what are the implications for us then standards-wise? We have to have some conversation around what really are our power standards, what are the things that we know we're really going to need to dig in on, because there's other things that are probably going to have to end up on the cutting room floor. And that's obviously a tough conversation, but has to come in at some point. The other piece on a 4x4 schedule is sometimes you can run into situations where in a nutshell, the best analogy I can give you is imagine a semester class. A semester class is now kind of converted into a quarter, and a year-long class is converted into roughly a semester. We would have to be really, really intentional with scheduling, and again, not having scheduled this, I'm not quite sure how that would work, so that's something that we would have to figure out. But we would have to be really intentional with scheduling to try to make sure that you don't have students that get semester 1 during quarter 1 and then semester 2 of a class later in quarter 3 or quarter 4, if that makes sense. You don't want that gap. And again, that may present some challenges with regard to scheduling to make sure that kids can kind of flow from one thing to the next. But you can imagine with a math class, we don't want kids taking 9 weeks of a math class and then having off for 18 weeks before they have to hop back into another math class. As far, yes, please, Allison.
Interrupt, but I just want to, so that would also like scheduling, that would be like AP classes. You wouldn't want someone, right? Like, I mean, you wouldn't want to be doing it first semester and then you're taking the, like, you have to really work with those
It poses challenges
Yeah.
because, take a semester-long AP course, for example. Say we're talking AP Micro Econ, for example. Let's say that your student ends up in that class term 3 or quarter 3. They complete the whole course, but they end that course probably around spring break, and then there's about a 7-week period before they sit for their AP exam. So there's a lot of downtime where they're not in that content area. The flip side of that is if they're in that course during fourth quarter, it's great that they're taking the exam during the time when they're in the class, except that exam is in May. So that's 3 or 4 weeks worth of material that they're not getting prior to that exam. So either of those present potential challenges, yes.
Unless you start school earlier.
Unless you start school early, there we go.
I'm sorry I'm feeling so dense here, but I don't really understand how, you get more seat time in a 6x2 schedule when you've got less passing time with a 4x4 block schedule, and yet you're saying that there's a loss of 20% instructional minutes. Can you explain that to me? I don't really understand.
I will do my best, and I don't have a whiteboard to
Okay.
break it down. I was not a math teacher, but I did teach science, and we always said math is the key that opens the door to science, so we'll see how I do here. Imagine it this way. If we go from roughly 53 minutes to 85 minutes, again, that's a factor of about 1.5. That's about 1.5 times the amount of class that you're getting. But each of those, the length, the duration of that class is getting cut in half because a year-long class is getting cut down to a semester, or a semester is getting cut down to a quarter. So even though the number of minutes is going up by a factor of 1.5, the duration of your class is going down by a factor of 2, which means that the net on that whole piece, when you add up the number of minutes, you're talking about 80% of the total number of minutes. 85 minutes a day times 90 days is less than 53 minutes a day times 172 days.
Okay, that makes sense. And then you're buying time for the electives.
Correct. Well,
Sort of.
I guess
Sort of.
maybe a way to look at it now.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
How'd I do?
It's 9,116 minutes on the 6-period day,
Okay.
and it's 7,000, just over 7,000 minutes on the 4-period day.
Okay.
So-
All right. Math.
And so with this scheduling, obviously you mentioned trying to mitigate gaps, which to your point, Chairperson Sherman, there's going to be a lot more planning involved. Are we invested enough within our counselors that they can take on extra capacity and more hands-on to be able to best guide students through this process? Would that be
Well-
something we have to keep in account as well?
100%. It's something that we'll have to take into consideration. And I think our staff, for the most part, again, we haven't done a straw poll necessarily, but when we talked about the idea of, hey, the board may be willing to entertain this, so what would we like to accomplish? I think the general sense is there's some enthusiasm. People recognize the challenges that are going to come with any of these schedules. And yes, there's a lot that's going to fall on our schedulers. So, our assistant principal, Matt Kraft, who primarily builds the schedule, counselors, it's going to be all hands on deck. Everybody's going to have a huge role to play because we're all going to have a learning curve that goes up, and I'll talk about that. That's actually even in professional development was kind of listed on there too. Teaching on a block for 85 minutes should look different than teaching on a 53-minute class period. And so, again, there's some development that's needed there too. So all of us will have a learning curve in some way, shape, or form, and we'll have to be invested in that.
Thank you.
And then, sorry, one last question,
Oh,
if I don't mind. About a month ago, we were presented with a preliminary calendar proposal. would, let's say that proposal, and that's obviously subject to change, is this all conducive to whatever direction that we go? Is that going to change as well as we look forward?
This could be done independently of the calendar.
All independent, okay, perfect. Good, okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. So just here's a kind of a rough side-by-side comparison. Again, the way the extra electives come into play, again, here you go, Director Petrie, there's another math problem for you. On a 4-period day, each credit is roughly a quarter. So your students are achieving a credit over the course of 9 weeks. So that's 4 credits times 4 grading periods. It's 16 credit-bearing opportunities each year. Times 4 years is a total of 64 credits then that are available over the course of a 4-year high school career. The next slides there, the next columns there, I put asterisks next to all of those numbers because when we start talking about graduation requirements, the number of required credits, and then really the nitty-gritty, how does that break down to the number of electives that students would get? Technically, credits are somewhat arbitrary. We have control over that. We as a district can set what the graduation requirements are. So that doesn't have to be a number that's locked in stone. But if you look at some of the neighboring schools that are running a schedule like this, Wayzata High School, for example, they're on a 4-period day and they require 60 credits for graduation. That's a very high percentage of credits that students need to earn in order to do that. And again, we don't have to choose 60, you could choose 58. There's other schools that are lower than that, maybe even closer to 56. But the bottom line is, once you establish what the number of required credits is, as long as we don't dip below what the requirement is for MDE, the rest of your credits then are opportunities for electives. And just in taking a quick look even at that schedule, if we were to settle on a number like, again, 60 is a high number, but if we were to settle on that just hypothetically, if your number of required credits even is at 37 required credits, that means you have an opportunity for 23 elective credits, and 23 out of 60 is about 38%, as opposed to the 11 out of 43 that we have right now, which is about 25%. Does that make sense? Another option, and admittedly, I'm less familiar with this one. I've tried to do some homework for you to be as educated as I can, but another option is a 7-period day schedule. There are some schools that run a straight 7-period day schedule, and students are in 7 classes every day. There are some schools that run a 7-period day schedule, but really only require their students to take 6 out of 7. And they might have one of those time blocks that's more flexible that, for lack of a better term, could be used as a study hall or something like that, where they work on assignments for their other classes. The opportunities on a schedule like this are obviously, this provides opportunities for additional electives. If we were to keep the number of graduation requirements in our district roughly the same, but we increase the number of opportunities and the courses that kids have access to during the course of the day, we're opening up opportunities for students. If we were, say, hypothetically, only to require 6 periods, we're roughly keeping a 6-period, all of the requirements that we currently have, but adding another class. That frees up some opportunities potentially for some of the flexibility kinds of things like we had talked about previously, where now you might be able to run intervention, you can schedule the student into a section, maybe there's a study hall, things along those lines. The challenges associated with this are obviously, again, we'd have some decisions to make in terms of whether we go 6 or 7, and if we were, say, to go 6 out of 7, that presents some scheduling challenges potentially for staff. How do we address that? When Stillwater ran a 7-period day back, again, I want to say probably 20-plus years ago, my understanding is, I believe, that was teachers were only teaching something like 5 out of 7 on that day. And again, I'm not sure whether there was supervised study hall or quite how structured some of those other opportunities were. But again, that presents some potential challenges looking at a schedule like this. And so again, for consideration, we would have to have conversation around, do students take a 6-period day or do they take a 7-period day? Just to go back, actually, Chris, can you go back to that one slide one last time? So just one last maybe closing thought on this. One other piece around this is that there's opportunities, again, if we were to keep hypothetically, say we're only requiring students to take 6 periods, but there's 7 opportunities, again, students then have the opportunity, they've got an extra period to be able to take some of those electives. So again, if I'm, say, that 4-year college-bound student that takes a world language, takes music, I don't have the ability to do art or project lead the way or music or business or something like that. Now, theoretically, they have the opportunity to do that, but what we've just done is we've added another period to their schedule as well. And so while on the one hand, a schedule like this does mathematically free up more opportunities for electives for students, if one of our other goals is to try to calm things down and make sure that they're in a good spot mental health-wise, I don't know that we've necessarily solved that with that. So we may have kind of solved one question, but I don't know that we've definitively done that for 2. As far as what this looks like, again, there's some considerations here for whether we would be requiring 6 credits or whether we would just run a full 7 credit requirement. And again, that's why there's 2 numbers there. Again, the idea that we can set the graduation requirements, so the number of required credits and the number of electives can be somewhat variable within that, but you can also see that the number of elective opportunities absolutely goes up. Another one that I started studying here just over the course of the past week and had some conversation with metro area principal that runs this schedule is a 7x2 modified schedule. On a 7x2 modified, the best way that I can explain it is it's a 7-period day that kind of functions a little bit more like the block schedule that I introduced at the beginning. If you think of it, think of it as 8 time blocks roughly over the course of 2 days. And one of the things actually that I forgot to mention even with that 4x4 schedule is there are some ways potentially to modify that. There are some schools that run a 4x4 schedule but run almost an every other day schedule. That's part of what they do to help mitigate some of those problems with the gaps that I talked about earlier. Then you maybe can take a course over the course of the whole entire year. But you're doing it every other day, and again, students have 8 classes that they're kind of juggling at one time. It slows things down, but it adds up more classes. This is a schedule that might potentially provide the best of both worlds. I don't know because this is relatively new, but Edina High School runs a 7x2 modified schedule. And the way that this works is they have an odd day and an even day. On an odd day, they run periods 1, 3, 5, and 7. So again, imagine a student had, say, 7 class periods. Odd day is 1, 3, 5, 7. On an even day, they have periods 2, 4, 6, and then we'll call it period 8, even though there isn't an 8th period. But what they do with that 8th time block is they break that up, and that's where that flexibility piece that I mentioned earlier comes into play. You can get creative with what you want to do with that time. For example, you could run, I hesitate to use the term advisory because advisory doesn't always have the greatest connotation in high school, but the bottom line is we do need opportunities to check in and connect with students. And so when we sit down with them to monitor their academic progress, have a staff member that kind of serves as a point person for them to make sure that they're plugged in with teachers. The last time block there is very similar to our office hours, where again, students have flexibility to go to the teacher that they need, and again, a lot of those arrangements and assignments get made during that check and connect period. So the purpose of that check and connect is to sit down and say, Director Thielander, I see that you didn't get your math assignment done, and I know that you're getting a little bit behind in there. We need to make sure that you go in and see Mr. Bach, who clearly knows math because he explained it so well in his speech. That's where those arrangements get made, is during that check and connect time. So that's part of how we maximize the effectiveness of the office hours segment that's there at the end. What Edina does on this schedule that's also kind of unique is they only require students to take 6 periods. So their total number of credits, very similar to our credit requirements. Kids would have 6 times 4 years, that's 48, or 12 rather, times 4 years. That's 48 credit-bearing opportunities. They need 43 out of 48 to graduate, but they have an opportunity to take the 7th, but it's not all crammed in 7 periods a day like a traditional 7-period day schedule. It's a little bit more slowed down like that block schedule is. And so that's where some of that flexibility kind of comes into play. And so, again, this is something that could potentially represent the best of both worlds, and clearly something that we would want to explore if the decision was made.
Yeah, can I ask, and you said this is new to you and you're working and kind of collaborating with this other principal. Do students struggle at all? I mean, is there anything with like an even day and odd day? Is there a struggle there in balancing that and coming prepared?
Kids get pretty used to that. Certainly, it's a challenge and it's a consideration, is the idea that you're juggling multiple schedules during the course of the week. Because the other thing that I didn't even really have a chance to get into, but it ties right into your question, is the idea that this represents, there's an even number of days here, but there's an odd number of days in the week, right?
Right.
And so actually what Edina does is they run a schedule where on Monday, Tuesday, Friday, they run a 7-period day, and kids are actually checking in with each of those 7 teachers. The odd day, even day comes into play on Wednesday, Thursday. So they're really only running this schedule 2 days a week. I asked the principal, though, I said, if you wanted to make a concerted effort to go to a block schedule, would you ever entertain the idea of potentially running your odd day, even day on Monday, Tuesday? You run your 7-period day on Wednesday, and then run another odd day, even day on Thursday, Friday, so that the majority of your schedule is on more of a block schedule, and less of it is on the 7-period day. Either way, you have multiple schedules during the week to juggle, but there's actually a number of schools very close by us. There's schools in South Washington County that are running something kind of similar to that, where kids are balancing multiple schedules during the course of the week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Again, the kind of the breakdown on something like this, very similar to the last slide that was 7 by 2. The number of credit bearing opportunities is going to be very similar. Kids are going to have more opportunities to do that, but they're also going to have more opportunity for some of the flexibility that we talked about, where maybe they have the time that they need to follow up with individual teachers, or do some of the depth versus breadth that they don't have on a 7 by 2. On a traditional 7 by 2 schedule, your classes are probably going to be closer to 48 to 50 minutes. We'd be losing at least 5 minutes per class from where we are now. All right. The piece that, again, I'm sure all of you are very concerned about, because this is the factor, right? I mean, if money were no object, this would all be a no-brainer, right? I'm going to preface this slide with a disclaimer that I am not a finance director. So this represents some estimates, and the other piece that I would say is the pieces that I'm throwing out here for consideration take into account staffing costs. They do not reflect any costs that would be associated with professional development. But I talked a little bit about the idea that if we were, say, to teach on a different schedule where there's a lot more periods, instruction should look different. We would want to invest in that, because we would want our teachers to be familiar with what those practices look like, and we would want to do that. The other piece is there would probably need to be cost in curriculum writing, because as I talked about, if the number of minutes in each course changes, teachers are going to have to focus on their curriculum. They're going to have to make some decisions about what's important, and again, we need to figure out ways to make sure that they're compensated for that and build that in as part of the investment. With that said, the bottom line is that any of these schedules would require additional staffing to run. You could modify some of these schedules. So again, none of the bottom line numbers there are numbers that would have to be etched in stone. Some of those are to be determined, because it's going to depend on how efficiently we choose to run that schedule. How much can we schedule and structure our students? And again, those are our best estimates as of right now, but we won't know that until we really start to get into the nitty-gritty, and that's something that, again, you as a board, if you decide that you would like us to pursue, I think we'd be up to the challenge to look at that, but that would require a lot more homework.
Can I ask a question here? I mean, you've been, and I know there'd be a lot more work to do in any of these, but I know just firsthand with my own student, who was exactly who you described, music, foreign language, he didn't, until he dropped his foreign language, he didn't have any electives. And it was really frustrating as a parent of a high school student to see how many electives we offer, and he couldn't take advantage of those. pathways, for example, different, all of these different opportunities that he couldn't really access because of his interests. Do a lot of our students suffer from that problem? I also see like the state's mandating more classes. So is a 6x2 becoming increasingly difficult no matter, we're going to have to tackle and address this because of that situation? And then thirdly, which do you like? I mean, where are you at? Because, I'm more interested in like where you're leaning at this point, I guess.
Well, how many people are watching tonight?
I know, right? I don't know. I mean,
I'm going to bail him out here for a second. All right. So what I would turn back to the board is, I just covered the 4 strategic directions at the beginning of the meeting tonight. Strategic direction A is ensure the learning process is adaptable to meet individual student needs. Okay? So of the 3 schedules he just talked about, does our 6-period day, is it adaptable to meet individual student needs? Okay, so I think that's a pretty clear, in my opinion, that's pretty clear. I'll go back, I'll look at strategic direction C. Utilize systems and align resources in an efficient manner to support learning. Are we doing that? I mean, it's efficient from a cost angle, but is it efficient to support learning if you're in a 6-period day?
No.
Can I slip a question in? Where does the extra staffing come in? I mean, the day starts here and ends here.
More classes. You have many more electives available to the students to be taught. So if there's more,
you have more. Okay.
So you're building more classes into the schedule. And so since you have more classes in the schedule, there's more opportunities for kids to take classes, and so you have to hire extra staff to teach those classes.
And for me, I'm personally, sorry, I kind of wasn't really done yet, but I do not like the 6x2. I mean, I don't think it does any of our strategic directions well. Sorry, I have a cough. But I'm curious of the 4x4, 7x2, 7x2 modified. Where's our where are you at, Superintendent? Do you have an opinion, or do you have, I know it's early, but I don't know which would work best for our kids.
We were on a 7x2 in Albertley, okay? And it worked fine. I'll just give you my personal experience. All right, I came to register my daughter when we moved here last summer. So sat down with the counselor, and my daughter was in band, she was in choir, she was in French. Well, you're 2 of the 3 you can do here, but you can't do all 3.
Right.
And I'm like, what? We're coming to Stillwater. It's just because those are the limitations of the 6-period day. And I would state that is probably the one thing I hear when I'm talking to parents in the community, more than anything, is the limitations of the 6-period day on opportunities for their students. So I'm not going to stand up here and give you, and I've taught in the 4-period day, I've taught in the 7-period day, and I've been actually a high school principal when we did a hybrid where we had, I think, 3 hours a block and then two skinnies, we called them. As a teacher, I preferred the 4-period day.
And Director Sherman, to your point, or Chair Sherman, to your point, I do think there's better vehicles than what we have right now to deliver an experience. And so to your point, when we talk about pathways, when we talk about experiential learning, when we talk about opportunities potentially outside of the classroom, I do think that there's better vehicles to be able to do that. And I'm also really sensitive to the issue that you raised, because you're right, there are more requirements that are coming down the road. Personal finance is coming. That's going to be another requirement that is not optional and is a great idea. Our kids should have that. But that's going to lock them in potentially even more. We've talked about some of the creative things that we could do. Again, brainstorming, now no nitty-gritty yet. But if we had more opportunities, what could we even do, say, to help assist the transition into high school? Could we do a course, maybe even make it a required course? Maybe there's elements of the personalized learning plan that can be embedded across 4 years. Maybe there's an introductory course that we could do with ninth grade where we sit down and talk with them about how to use a binder, how to use a planner, how to take notes, all of the things that help make for a successful high school student that we try to tag on the fly now and try to incorporate into some of those classes where we have some extra minutes. But is there a more structured way that we could deliver that? And again, I think if we had more opportunities to do that, we could put some brains on that.
Is there any evidence that any given schedule functions better, or are there too many variables? It's teacher dependent, it's administration dependent. Is there any?
If you're talking directly and related to student achievement, I am not aware that there is a strong correlation from one schedule to another in terms of student achievement. Okay. Again, I think from our lens, that's part of why what we centered our discussion on was how do we provide more opportunities for students to take what they want, and is there a way that we could potentially positively impact their mental health through providing some of the flexibility that kids today really like and look forward to.
Other questions? Yes, Philander.
Appreciate the historical perspective that you provided with some asterisks, but that's really helpful to kind of see what that looked like in the past. Has this been addressed by previous boards, or what was the last time this was brought up for discussion?
I mean, you've presented to previous boards.
I would say it's been discussed, but and I've been asked to prepare some materials, and so it's been discussed, but it's kind of stayed at that level. I would say it hasn't necessarily gained traction. It's been discussed as part of a long-range plan. I mean, the most optimistic I would say that I ever got about discussing this really in earnest was when we came a couple of years ago, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, to talk about pathways with the board, and the idea that philosophically, this was work that we really believed in terms of the experience that a high school student should have. And when we talked about that and outlined that and tried to get the board to understand what programming like that could do for our students, we discussed the idea that, hey, long-term, like if we're able to sustain this or promote this in a sustainable way, the idea that a schedule change would help philosophically with a program like that.
Thank you.
Dr. Hocker?
So I guess I have a comment and then I have a question as well. The thing that really is striking me is kids who are on a track to a 4-year college, how limiting our 6x2 schedule is. And in connection to that Pathways program that we're going to be learning more about shortly, it really seems like we have this great opportunity, but kids who are hoping for that 4-year college don't have that opportunity within our current schedule to really explore when it really is the prime time to explore different careers. So for me, I am very interested in what other opportunities what other structure can we create to allow for those opportunities. And yes, there is an additional cost for that, for sure. But we are a one high school district. That means that this is an investment on every kid in our whole district funnels through this one school. So for me, that's an investment that really is worth making. So I'm very excited that we are having this discussion, and I'm hopeful for kind of how we can use this to enhance some of our other programs.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and also, are we done with our presentation? We have got a couple more slides on.
Pretty close.
Okay, I'm just curious about the comparisons. Yeah.
I was just going to give you a quick little breakdown of these are some of our both neighboring schools and schools that we might compare to, and other schools maybe that just run some of the schedules that I talked about, just to give you a sense. Again, I mentioned Wayzata. Wayzata is currently on a block schedule. I don't recall off the top of my head whether they are traditional block or whether they kind of go with that A day, B day. Hudson High School, for example, right across the river is on a 4-period day, but they go every other day. So students have 8 classes essentially. They go every other day, and so that way they're in classes throughout the course of the year, and they don't have everything condensed and have those big gaps. But again, that means 8 classes. Edina, as I mentioned, is on the 7x2 modified. That seems to free up a lot of flexibility. White Bear Lake is a little bit confusing because right now they have two campuses. So one campus is on the 6x2, another campus is on the 7x2. Our neighbors in Matamidi are currently on the same schedule that we are, although they do run it a little bit differently. It's more of a semester. Their credit breakdown basically works out a little bit different than ours. They consider a year-long class to be a credit, whereas we consider a semester to be a credit, so a year-long would be 2 credits. Minnetonka's on a 6x2, Mounds View's on a 6x2, Forest Lake is on an 8x2, so again, that's kind of that block schedule. Cretin is actually on a 7-period-day trimester schedule, the only one I'm aware of that does that. Our neighbors in South Wash are on a 6-period day with trimesters, and Roseville is on a 5-period day with trimesters. We've had some conversation around that. One of the conversations that we had around a trimester system is that also increases the frequency of grading periods. And so again, that kind of ties into some of the mental health pieces, because certainly our mental health issues tend to spike at the end of a grading period with both with students and potentially even with staff, but especially with students who we're trying to be very conscious of. In terms of what's next, again, I would certainly defer to the board. I've done my best to try to provide you with some information here tonight. But if this is something that the board were interested in, again, in terms of a timeline, this is certainly a long process. We would need time to do an awful lot of work. And certainly in the fall, if this is something that we wanted to pursue, we would have a lot more work to do, just even starting by gaining feedback. We'd have to talk an awful lot with our kids. We need to talk an awful lot with our parents to get some of that feedback. We'd have an awful lot of work to do with our staff to look at some of these sample schedules in some other schools, try to put our heads together creatively to figure out the best ways to maximize a schedule. I think the intent there would be, well, we don't want to create the wheel. No one has time to be that inventive. We'd like to look at some of the work of what people have done before us. But I also feel like, again, we've got some really smart and really talented people who can think outside the box a little bit and maybe take the starting point from some of these other places and put the spin on it that makes Stillwater Stillwater. And again, I think that we could potentially do that, but we would need time to do that. And so all of that would need to go through during the fall, at which point in time, if you were interested in a recommendation from us, again, we'd work that through with staff, students, and families, and be prepared to come back at some point later on next year. In the winter then, if that's something that you wanted to sit down and take a vote on, that would give us time then to implement some of the professional development and some of the other learning work that we would need to do in order to prepare for that. So we'd be looking at least a year out before we could execute something like this.
I mean, it's for me, I like I said, I mean, I was dissatisfied as a parent with a 6x2 schedule with my son. So I don't love the 6x2. Every schedule that you presented here seems to have some pluses and minuses to it, that you're probably more adept at balancing those. I think from my standpoint, it's the cost. I mean, it's the cost, because I know we're making a conscious choice to invest in PD, curriculum, staffing, and so I just want to make sure that what we do is sustainable. But for me, it is a priority because, like Director Hockert says, we're a one high school district. This impacts every single student that comes through our district. So, no, I would be in favor of further exploring. For certain. Director.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would definitely be in favor of further exploring as well. So, Principal Buck, thank you so much. This is super informative. And I just think, kind of as Dr. Funk mentions, this strategic direction, I think this is an opportunity that we have to look at what ways can we best honor and engage our students as they work through their journey through Stillwater Area High School. And I think right now, there's some limitations. A student shouldn't have to give up a foreign language or music in order to take another elective. I mean, I don't think that's fair, and I think that's a lost opportunity that we have to do that. So, I think as we look at some of the comparison, I mean, it's all over the map. I mean, it's hard to try to quantify what might be the best, other than, for me, relying, on you, Principal Bach, district leadership, teachers, other subject matter experts to help guide us of what do you think will be the best direction and be best for student achievement and outcome. And I would be all in favor of supporting that if there's a compelling reason to do that, because I think there's a lot of reasons to give it strong consideration. So thank you.
Oh, let me go here and then I'll go.
You're just saying if we would be interested in considering a change, sure, why not? We're certainly not going to digest it all tonight. The people I want to talk to is we got a group of teachers right here, starting right there. I'd like to know what their input is. And we got a year to sort it out. Why not? And you could always come back to what you're already doing and what have you lost? A little bit of time.
I agree with my fellow directors that I think that this is worth exploring. Your enthusiasm comes through. What about the teachers and other staff at your high school? How are they feeling about this?
Again, when we had conversation around the idea, let's put it this way, I didn't necessarily frame the question like, hey, do you want to change the schedule? The question was more, hey, the board is willing to entertain this. If the board were going to consider this, what would we like? I think what I would tell you is 8 years in this job, or 9 years, has taught me that if there was a lot of opposition, we wouldn't have even gotten very far on answering that question. And we came through with some themes that emerged pretty clearly. My general sense, honestly, is that I think our staff, a general majority of our staff, is excited about the prospect of this and what this could potentially do for students. I think that our staff recognizes the limitations of our current schedule too, and our staff probably believes, as I do, that there are other vehicles that would deliver a better experience potentially for students. Again, if we can put our creative minds together, I think we can capitalize on that. I think the capacity is greater on some of those other schedules. With that said, at the end of the day, our job is to deliver a world-class experience regardless of what schedule students are on. To one of the pieces that you raised earlier, Director Hockert, I was thinking about that, and I was talking about the pathways because I think you were asking about pathways. And again, I believe that other schedules would be a better vehicle for something like that. However, we don't have that right now. And so as an example of one of the ways, that, again, that we kind of tailor this to Stillwater, and you'll hear about this in the pathways presentation that comes up, one of our pathways is in arts and communication. And if you look at other schools that have pathways programs, there are not very many that have anything in arts and communication. Part of why we do that is because we recognize we've got the best music program in the state of Minnesota, bar none. And so for students that are able to progress all the way through that, they're getting opportunities for college credit. Why wouldn't we recognize that as a pathway and help make sure that students understand that progressing all the way through those opportunities gets them to a place where there's more opportunities for post-secondary kinds of pieces. Again, that's something where we made a very conscious decision to capitalize on the strengths and talents that we have and maximize the schedule that we have in place. So again, regardless of what the schedule is, we'll be looking for ways to try to maximize that. But I think the capacity is greater if there's latitude to do some of those other things.
And I would like to say, just getting the students' voice in this early on, I think would be important too, because this just directly impacts them. Like I do know, I've talked to a lot of kids when, I think during COVID, it was a little bit more like a block schedule. Like, I don't know if you would call it modified, or I don't know if it was 4x4, but there was an easing of some stress that they could focus on fewer classes, and also the variety and the difference between a day. Like sometimes it can get very monotonous, is what I heard from a lot of students, like taking 6 classes Monday through Friday, that just varying it up so that a day is a little bit different than the next day did something for their mental health and their stress and their engagement too. You know, every day was maybe a little bit different. So there's a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, as I kind of try to better quantify some of the differences with these different scheduling options, regardless of what I tell my boys that like we had it way tougher growing up than they do. I mean, the reality is that
we did. Let's be honest.
Well, yeah, way longer walk, but yeah, no. As I look at that, what the takeaways is the student conversations, and whether it be the book awards or the student scholarships or just being at the high school. It's complex to be a high school student now. I mean, they're taking full class loads, they have AP courses, you have social media, they're doing extracurriculars, a lot of times multiple ones, and I think there's just a lot of moving parts that go into that. And I think, as I look at that, based in your opinion, and again, just initial kind of takeaway, what scheduling option do you feel will best meet the needs of students with all the other stuff they have going on and trying to, right now, balance a 6x2 or what it is right now versus some of these other options? Is there any quantifiable difference that you can consider top of mind, or?
Well, again, I would hesitate to pick one over the other right now, because again, I think that's like we just talked about, we have to involve students in this process, we have to involve parents in this process. We have to make sure that everybody understands what the pros and cons of all of these different schedules are, and that will lead us collectively to good decisions so that we feel good about whatever decision we wind up going with. Any of them will have positive aspects. It's our job to maximize those positive aspects with whatever it is that we choose.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
You're welcome.
And the effort so far, and look forward to more information to come.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. I appreciate it.
Go forth and plan.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick 5-minute recess here for a restroom break, and then we'll come back for our last report of the evening.
How many slides you got done?
Sorry. So
already.
just a quick recess.
I've been drinking too much water.
And then, would be interesting too, is what would be some of those, one thing I forgot to ask is like some of the add-ons.
Are we good to go?
Credit union, right, with this.
Yeah.
He said he just needs a couple.
Oh.
More clear.
It's a couple minutes.
Thank you. All right, we're back. We have one final report this evening, and that is the Pathways programming, so welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Sherman, School Board Director, Superintendent Funk. Tonight, I also have Bob Manning and Rachel Stile up here with me to talk about the Pathways programming review, and they are the Pathways coordinators. So we will get started. What we are starting with is what the vision for Pathways was when we began, and it was to create meaningful real-world opportunities inside and outside the classroom and promote academic achievement for all students at Stillwater Area High School. And then the mission is to prepare all students for the future by offering career-relevant coursework and creating passion-led and interest-focused work experiences and opportunities. And if you listen to the strategic or the operational goals and strategic directions, these fit nicely with that. So what does Stillwater's Pathways look like? It comprises dozens of offerings and initiatives into one coordinated program, and then it aligns our high school curriculum to 4 unique job-focused groups and 15 programs of study, and we'll break those down a little bit later. Students are encouraged to move between many career pathways and opportunities, and they are allowed to experiment in a safe space and make educated choices about those future careers that they're interested in pursuing. History of Pathways in Stillwater. In 2018-19 school year, the school board administrators and teachers visited Alexandria and Mounds View to get an idea of what Pathways programs look like and different models. There were student and staff interviews and surveys, site visits, research data collection, and then figuring out, identifying pathways and aligning the current class offerings to that model. In 2019-20, there was Focus PD. The registration guide was reformatted. Partnership with Century College was developed, along with some business partnerships, and the Pathways program was initiated. So we're still in our infancy of this program. The history and the kind of the why behind this is designing this with students in mind and what they wanted. So students felt like there weren't enough extended learning opportunities and that they did not understand what skills were needed for the next phase beyond high school. And that they didn't have enough time in their schedule, and we just heard about that even more so, that they didn't have enough time in their schedule, or the schedule wasn't flexible enough to support kind of that exploration, and they weren't sure how the course or offerings were relevant to what their work would be in the future. So we tried to take that in mind to design the program. So looking at what Pathways is versus an academia model is Pathways provides that comprehensive programming to help students find their unique path. So there are different ways that they can do that through sequential academic programming, gaining early career or college credits, and looking at career clusters. They can explore and reflect on different careers, and they can have that hands-on experience to try out different careers or network with employers. The academy is more a school within a school that links the different people together, peers, teachers, and community, and it's much more structured. This Pathways is a little more exploratory and has a little bit more movement and fluidity. The benefits of Pathways, we look to improve student outcomes through attendance, GPA, graduation rates, college attendance, and labor market outcomes. Really, we want our students to stay in Minnesota, and we'd love for them to stay in the community of Stillwater, so providing them those pathways and showing them visible pathways within our own community helps all of us. There are 3 key goals of our Pathways program. It's academic, exploratory, and experiences. And it does align with our MDE 4 domains of college and career readiness, which are employability skills, mindset and social awareness, career development awareness, and transitional knowledge. A lot of those skills that employers would like our students to have, and then that opportunity to find out what those careers are really like. So you can see it's very small, the different courses that we have and what those check off in what they accomplish in those. There's a lot of pathways under those different skills that I listed in the 4 areas, and so it just gives that information here. We have embedded programming. The beauty of Pathways is that it can serve all of our students. They will interact with the Pathways programming, and you can kind of take advantage of that at the different levels that you would like. There's programming for some that includes the programming to reach those students who want to kind of explore different options at a deeper level, and then deeper programming for few is personalized programming that's customized based on their unique interests and goals. So this just shows you the different ways that you can go off on those pathways. You can take advantage of all 3 of those, or just start to dabble and get a broad overview. So we have different programmings by level. Some of the introductory things are career days, our career fair that was a huge success this year that some of you were able to attend, career conversations, and game days. So those are kind of those introductory experiences, and also a personalized learning plan that they start to look at what would they be interested in doing. Intermediate, there would be Pathways projects, career coaching, and then advanced, they could get involved in some internships or some career seminars or research projects. So again, academic, exploration, experiential. The academic piece, looking at our registration guide, we have 6 career technical education teachers. We have 5 courses with 11 course title changes. There's opportunity for 11 early college credit courses, 6 accelerated pathways, healthcare programming, and then that career seminar and internship course. They can, as far as exploration, look at that personalized learning plan and evolve as they go through each year. Game day, college, career, and military visits, all of those, they get a big opportunity to see the different options available to them. The career fair had multitude of career opportunities and conversations with different people in our community. And then they take an interest inventory tool in grade 9 to get a sense of where their interests align with a possible career. Career conversations, projects, career days, coaching, and interviews, field trips, and site visits all are more that hands-on experiential learning that is really beneficial. Yes.
Just to clarify on the academic side, those are things we've added. So those are in addition to the programming that was in place when we started in 2020. So we have more than 6 CTE teachers, but that's what we've brought on board.
Thank you. You can see we have lots of partnerships. And again, this is a wide open opportunity to expand even more, and we're excited about those possibilities. But we have some really strong partnerships with these current local companies. And again, it's advantageous to them because hopefully our kids will stay in the community or come back to the community and hopefully find a career. It's been really fun in the different simulated experiences when the students say that they were a Stillwater area high school graduate and they're a lawyer or a nurse or a doctor or those kinds of things. So it resonates with our students. These are the 4 pathways and the 15 programs of study. And again, like Principal Bach pointed out, arts and communication is a unique pathway that we have at Stillwater that incorporates that fine arts, visual communication, journalism, and performing arts so that it does help our students that take that path to get some opportunities for credit. Business, health sciences and human sciences, and STEM and environment. And then our electives match those different pathways and programs of study. We have over 50 courses that have college partnerships, and we have 16 courses that have articulated credits, which means students can earn kind of that introductory college level class or course and credit. Those partnerships are with Century College, Normandale College, and Hennepin Tech. Then we have College in the Schools, and that partnership is with the U of M, and we have 3 courses that go along with that. Concurrent enrollment, where students get the high school credit and college credit, and those partnerships are with Bethel, Mankato, Century College. We have advanced placement. We have 21 different courses. Now that AP is a little bit different because you take the course and you take the test, and then that, depending on your performance on the test, determines what you get as far as college credit, and it also is determined by the actual college the students attend. So you may or may not be guaranteed college credit when you take an AP class. So that's just something to note there. And then Project Lead the Way has opportunity for internships or college credit as well. And we have 4 courses that lead it along there. Go ahead.
The question on
Yes.
this slide, do the 916 career and tech, is that included in this or is that a separate thing? Okay. Is that involved with pathways at all, the 916 career and tech options? Or is that kind of a whole different?
We don't offer
bucket?
something and a student is interested, we can push them towards something there. And that's typical for the area schools. They offer some really, some excellent CTE courses. And if we don't offer it, then yeah, we would recommend that they take it.
Okay.
It's a different schedule though, so.
Yeah, it is. Okay, thank you.
So when we look at some of these opportunities for college credit, a lot of times what we're noticing is that over $7,000 of free credit are kind of left on the table. Students aren't able to, they're not realizing they have those credits to apply into their program of study post high school. So we're really trying to make them aware of that. There are 5 to 7 embedded credits in every program of study in those pathways. And 11 new early college credit courses have been added since 2020. And then we've added accelerated pathways in a Google form for seniors to try to help with that understanding and knowledge of what they're gaining and what they're leaving with. This is our senior exit survey, is that what it's called? Information from that in the senior survey data in 21, 22, and 23. And asking the students, did you end your high school career with college credit? Gives examples, and you can see it's pretty consistent what they say. You know, we're in that anywhere from 60 to 70 4%. So there's still opportunities for us to improve in that area. And then the next one is students who participated in Pathways programming, if they're recognizing that they're experiencing different Pathways opportunities. So again, you can see though in the 2023 data that they are starting to see that as we've increased those opportunities, which is really great. So this is the numbers of student involvement. And again, if you look at, as the program began and that 22, 23, what those numbers have grown to in those introductory areas, especially looking at game day, 1,200 students participated in that. We're projected to grow that even more to 1,800 and 2,300. So that's touching so many students. And then again, that we're hoping that personalized learning plan that we will really expand there where every student has a personalized learning plan that they really are adding to and understanding what that will do for them later. So you can just see as we've added more opportunities, students have taken advantage of it and it's projected to grow even more. This is just, again, based off of that senior exit survey about where our students are going next. Many are going to a four-year college, some, the next two-year vocational school, and then it breaks down into a gap year or military, going right into the job market, or unsure at this time. So we did do surveys with our staff, students, and families on Pathways, and we received feedback from 75 families, 85 students, and 38 staff for about 198 total responses. So our average staff rating out of 5 is the 3.6, student rating 3.4, family rating 2.9. And again, as we look at this information, as you go to the next slide, there are valuable outcomes of Pathways that were identified. The students have an understanding of career and post-secondary training. They're utilizing those self-evaluations and interest surveys to identify that career pathway. They're making connections with professionals, learning about different jobs and careers. So the 77%, you can see all the percentages that career pathways experience are an important part of helping prepare students for college and career. Now, looking at if they're extremely familiar or very familiar with Pathways, you can see we have some work to do here. And that's an opportunity for that to happen because it's really highlighting what we're doing and then giving them more opportunities and understanding how it will benefit them as they leave high school. So again, they're most familiar with career fair, game day, career conversations, career days. This one is students are comfortable making career choices based on their interest, aptitude, experience, data instead of societal pressures. So high percentage of students, not so much families. So again, another opportunity to explain to our families how this will benefit their students. And then wondering about students gaining that confidence about pursuing post-high school plan through Pathways. Again, more opportunities there. We would hope that as more students participate in those intermediate and advanced levels, that we will see an increase here. And this just talks about, you can see, again, did not impact plans. They're not so sure it really did. Helped confirm for some, rethink, allowed them to make connections. Again, these are all things that we want to take into consideration as we continue our expanding the opportunities. These are our current costs. From grants and donations, we bring in $73,274. Because we have CTE staff that have gained that certification, we do get reimbursed. And that is, you get the $297 a year, and then how does that break down then? The 126, is that an additional 126?
So we've been working with staff to get our CTE staff certified, and as part of that, there's a levy reimbursement for each hour of the day they teach a CTE certified class. So the additional revenue from that work has generated about $126,000 annually. In addition to that, there's the PERK and grant funding, which generates about an additional $16,000 annually.
So that, the beauty of this program is we bring in some income to help offset the costs. So we do, Bob and Rachel's position right now is a 1.6. Bob is a 1.0 and Rachel is a 0.6 at this point with Pathway. She's a 1.0 staff member. They also spend a tremendous amount of time in the summer working on creating these opportunities and connecting the partnerships and things, and I'll show you that breakdown in the next slide. And then just the operating expenses like transportation, all of the things that go into paying for the opportunities that we're providing. So when they're working in the summer, they're meeting with staff and looking at the program reviews of the CTE classes and looking at potential new pathway projects and new courses or revisions that could come about, and then really exploring those community partnerships and getting, working with those college partners on articulating the agreements that we have, and then all the programming, because it's vast, and game day and college planning and all of those visits are huge undertakings. Career day and the career conversation plans, and then looking at planning for advisory boards, employer breakfast, again, the career fair and setting that all up, teacher externships that Bob's going to talk about later because we are really excited about that, and then speed networking opportunities for the students. So they're working hard during the summer to make this all happen. So that's where we are currently, and this is where we are looking to expand our programming. Looking at requiring a freshman seminar that could really dive into that personalized learning plan experience, and that we want students to take at least 2 courses in a program of study and complete that post-secondary plan and participate in at least one Pathways programming experience. So again, breaking it down by that academic exploration and experiences, expanding those early college partnerships and begin embedding more of those competencies in the curriculum for all. And then again, expanding that personalized learning plan for 9 through 12 so that each student would have 3 experiences per year. And then really doing more with that aptitude tool that can meet our students' needs, and acquire a system that tracks the Pathways experiences so students can see it, teachers can see it, parents know what it is. That's a communication tool. And then really just expanding our network of community partners and those experiences of interviews, job shadows, tours, internships attached to the Pathways experience. So it breaks it down by the grade level, and the highlighted pieces are what we would be adding to our current programming.
Can I ask just a quick question on here? The 9th grade, the fall, the aptitude and interest inventory, is that mandatory for all freshmen, or is that, I was just unclear.
So there was an opportunity we provided to all of our 9th grade students. They, in the past, used to take MCIS.
Okay.
And last year, we rolled out Use Science. MCIS is an interest inventory where students self-report. U-Science has that self-reporting interest inventory, but it also has an aptitude through a variety of brain games. So students who showed up that day in ninth grade did have the opportunity to take that.
And I know I liked that program. My son did it. It was really cool. So.
Yeah, so we're excited about some of those new opportunities. The financial literacy test drive is a partnership with Royal Credit Union. So I don't know if it can do the personal finance, but the credit that we need, but perhaps. So expanding in that 24, 25, again, you can see we're looking at building courses that plug the gaps in our program of study, really building out those programs of study that we can have those advanced options and they get those profession-based skills with inquiry and project-based learning. Rachel has this, she had this brain, really great brain opportunity of that we would have a May term or J term, but we kind of landed on a M term, that we would end kind of that in May, if we get out, depending on what calendar we use and depending when the last day of school is, we'd back up 2 weeks and just have an opportunity for exploration where students would be able to take a morning block of something that they're interested in and then an afternoon block and really dive into just different projects and inquiry and project-based learning opportunities. And it's really exciting what could be done there. And we thought that would be a great way for teachers who have new ideas for courses to kind of pilot those and see what the interest is and what maybe we can do as we look at those opportunities. So that's kind of an exciting thing that we'd like to explore. And then looking at our electives, which again, as Principal Bach presented, if we had a different schedule, there would be more opportunities for electives, and this would be based on labor market data because we don't even know what new careers are happening. That's evolving so quickly that we want to keep up with that and make sure students can have the skills necessary to meet that demand.
So, question for Bob and Rachel. So the freshman seminar, we thinking mandatory for all freshmen?
When we did our empathy work back in 2018, that was one of the biggest things that came out from students and staff. To Mr. Bach's point, building in those organizational skills through AVID, giving kids consistent routines to learn how to be a student at the high school. That came through loud and clear. But also having consistent opportunities to lay the foundation for that personalized learning plan could be an opportunity through a freshman seminar.
And a personal finance course included?
And personal finance was a huge piece of feedback in that empathy work as well.
Yep. So again, we'd be looking at those experiences, increasing those work-based learning opportunities. Then in 25, 26, again, continuing to develop those programs that have those programs of study that go from introductory to advanced options. And then, again, continue to look at our electives. And then there's opportunity to build this down. We want to make sure our 9 through 12 experience is really solid and that we have that pathways options for our students really well developed. But once that is done, we really see that this could be pushed down all the way through our students' whole educational career, going from kindergarten up through 12th grade, so that they could engage in some exploration or even looking at, as elementary goes on lots of field trips and what those experiences are and maybe aligning that work with some of the partnerships that we have and maybe theming the middle school and potentially theming the elementary and looking at our talent development options. And as we talked about in, when we were doing the GATE presentation and looking at Avid, as you can see, some of those things all naturally can go together. And so there's a lot of opportunity. We wouldn't begin doing that until we really have the high school solid, and then look to Bob and Rachel to really help guide that. So those are some of the ways that we can expand. So as we look at our opportunities, we really want to leverage that PD and teacher externships with all staff to support the expansion of college and career readiness programming for all students. Provides staff with a toolkit so that they understand how they can do that and embed it within their coursework. Expand our family education and awareness. Identify sustainable personnel and operational funding for coordinators. And as we develop this even further, we feel like adding another coordinator would be beneficial. Looking at a new high school schedule that could provide more opportunities for those electives. Really looking at aligning BAR, AVID, and Pathways framework at the high school so staff that we're not feeling like we're operating in silos, so all of that work can go together. Develop new courses within programs of study. Again, provide professional development for the staff to design those May term offerings. And then expand that programming in grades, actually early childhood to 8th, with curriculum coordinators, field trips, book choices, experiences, activities, people coming in to visit in the classroom. And then really looking at additional staffing to allow for that scaling of the personalized learning plan, work-based learning, and that E8 expansion. So there's lots of opportunities there. So you can see these are additional program costs, the summer work, and then adding a 0.2 to Rachel's current position in 24-25, that PD, and that looking at that interest aptitude tool that can range from 5,000 to 20, maybe even upwards past 20,000. And then in 25-26, adding an additional Pathways coordinator. These are just some of the impact of Pathways. It really helps students and families navigate high school and prepare them for the next steps. It helps our students discover new things and opportunities that can be beneficial for them and gain that confidence as they go out into the world after high school. And then looking at our ability to partner with businesses in the community is a huge opportunity and a benefit for all. And then just looking at our courses and curriculum and providing that real world opportunity that's integrated and embedded into the classroom and shows students the relevance of it, of their learning. Lastly, you can see we have the strategic directions on here and how Pathways really aligns to that. So equitable college and career readiness programming for all students aligns with strategic direction A. Personalized to meet students in their own career journey goes along with A and B. Embedded Pathways framework to maximize effectiveness and reach goes along with C. And then the community partnerships goes along with D. So we're excited about the opportunities, and we, again, feel it fits really nicely into our strategic direction.
Great,
And now you can direct any questions to Bob and Rachel.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep, Superintendent Funk.
Tell the board about the externship this summer, Bob.
Mm-hmm. Well, a teacher externship is an experience for teachers, and it's like an internship. I'll be honest, I don't know why they call it an externship, but when I did it myself 3 years ago, I worked for a week at Grandma's Bakery in White Bear Lake, and it was a great experience. I shadowed the CEO, and I worked. I made donuts and all sorts of things. They revised this. They discontinued it during COVID, and they revised it. I'm part of the group that's actually developing the plan right now, but the plan is that they have a cohort of 3 to 4 teachers who go on 3-hour tours in the morning and then another 3-hour tour in the afternoon with local employers from a range of industries. And so it covers all the different, industries across the area. And we have, so there's 66 total teachers who signed up for this, 19 from Stillwater. And I've been on the phone with local employers who are really excited to do this. I'll give you an example. I was just talking to an alum from Eckberg Lammers. We're going to have an experience. One of these tours will be at the government center. So they'll be able to see a trial, go to an empty courtroom with a judge and do the who's in the courtroom activity that we did here, but with staff. Talking directly to the people who have various roles in a courtroom. Then we'll go to the sheriff's office and we'll see all of the different careers within that office, go tour the jail, and be able to talk about how does that apply to, what they do. That's one of the tours, and we have a range of companies. It's going to be a great experience. And what I'm excited about is because if we talk about being efficient, if you can get teachers to do this, they can look at how does that make their class more relevant, and think of all the tentacles we have to reach every single student in that high school. So we have plans to do a lot more with this. We're actually going to model it after the Leadership in the Valley program that we do with the Stillwater Chamber, and we're excited.
Thank you. This was amazing and really good information. I'm sure it gives you some good information too, just strategically and directionally where to go. One question that I had was because these last two reports go hand in hand, in my opinion. Do you want to speak a little bit to what a change in the high school schedule, maybe how it limits you now, and maybe even impacts some of the numbers that we were looking at here in terms of awareness and participation, but then what a change would mean for the program?
So this is the third question from a board member tonight, trying to get you guys to land on, what schedule do you recommend? Okay.
We've heard that.
We're not going to recommend a schedule, but we can share that when we first started doing this work, staff were super excited, and one of the first things they came to us with is, I want to try this new course. I want to do this new thing. And that's where the brainstorm for the May term came up, is because starting a new course and launching it and filling it can be extremely challenging on our schedule. And so we started to be creative, thinking about what are ways within the sandbox that we have to play with to use our time to give staff opportunity to test out things, try new things, give students opportunity. Years ago, we used to have something called Flex Time, which was an opportunity for students to do that, but as that's transitioned into office hours, there's really not a space to do that. And so what a new schedule could do is build in those additional new elective opportunities that aren't currently in our schedule. So our current registration guide, the programs of study that Dawn mentioned, were based on our current offerings. And if we were to look at the sequence of programming, we do have gaps, and we have some things that are maybe outdated, and we have some areas where we need to bring in some new things that are more contemporary to what our labor market demands are. And so a new schedule could provide that opportunity to modernize in some spaces where we just haven't had the luxury of, a schedule that could support something like that. And as we look at the Pathways programming, we're really trying to leverage that office hours time to get students, in our space during that time. But if they do have other academic needs, they're not coming to us in that time. So a new schedule, whatever that looks like, could provide some opportunity there. I don't know if you would add any more.
I would add that flex period allows them to do things like the career seminar and the career internship. We started those classes. It gets kids out into the community working, literally doing a paid internship or just going out doing tours, job shadowing, interviews. So right now it's difficult for kids to even consider that.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, Director Petrie, and then I'll go.
Sure.
Thank you for that presentation. It was really interesting. I feel as though during the whole thing I was kind of fighting against what is probably an archaic view of what CTE is. You know, I had always kind of thought of it as career and technical education for students who probably aren't going on to a four-year college, degree, but you're talking about doctors and lawyers and all. So has the whole approach to CTE, the philosophy of it, changed over time? Or give me that sort of global look in terms of how things have changed, because it seems as though the way you're envisioning this Pathways program, it's everything.
Do you want to start? I can.
Sure.
answer.
Well, there's the career tech ed, and then there's what we're terming programs of study. And so the programs of study are based on career themes or career clusters of like courses. And so when a student, whether they're going to a college or career, they can recognize the courses I'm taking here align to a college major or a career out in the field. Career Tech Ed is still really looking at specific strands of programming that might lead to trades. So we have a visual communications, we have business, we have industrial tech, we have ag science. And so those are still somewhat traditional in what, those constructions are. But the greater emphasis now is what are the careers and career skills development within those career tech ed programs. And so, for example, tomorrow we're bringing Century College onto campus, we invited all of our admitted students to come in and look at what courses have you taken while at Stillwater that align to Century's programming. And a lot of those conversations are happening through articulated courses in our CTE programs. And so it just helps build those alignments and that awareness of the skill in my graphic design course leads to what outside the walls of this building. So.
Now, I would add, and I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that we're not discouraging people to go to a four-year university, but we're also helping the students understand that there's a wide range of opportunities out there that either only require a two-year degree or less, or that's a start for something. So in the medical field, there are all sorts of technical jobs that pay very well. A surgical tech right now is a high-demand field, and it requires a two-year degree and sometimes a one-year degree. So we're just trying to expose kids to all sorts of opportunities out there and trying to kind of disrupt the paradigm of what we think success is.
Thank you for that.
Hold on a second. I know Director Kelsenberg.
Does every student choose a pathway?
No.
How many?
That's a good question. We don't ask them to choose a pathway. The one thing about this is that it opens it up to whatever the student would like to do, and we encourage them to pivot if they want to, because that's what people do in life. They go out and their path is generally like this instead of linear. So they don't have to choose a pathway. They can choose from pathways, and they can see the pathways, but they don't have to choose that like some schools ask.
Okay.
Director Hackert?
Thank you. So I guess I'm noticing a pattern from the survey here that maybe not as many families and students as well are familiar with the program, taking advantage of the program, and kind of connecting the dots from our previous presentation. We have a lot of students potentially on a four-year college track and needing to fill those graduation requirements, and with their schedule, of course, that limits their elective options. And then at the same time, I'm seeing with the programs of study, we have programs like teaching, that's a four-year degree, but if you can't take the classes because of your schedule, then you're not going to be interested in or understanding and pursuing the pathways. So I guess I'm connecting dots here on kind of how we need to revamp how we do this in order to make it effective for the majority of our students. But I guess what I'm wondering is, are these pathways, like programs of study, pathways classes, are they integrated into current classes, or are they really electives that are kind of inaccessible to students on that four-year path?
They're accessible, but we have a limiting schedule. So kids could do it, but they have to give up a language or a music. So the pathways are aligned to a major and to a career, and those are electives that they can only choose if they're not on the not a four-year track, but a four-year track where you're taking the music and the language, so.
And our hope is as we develop new high-interest courses, that even some of our seniors who may have the opportunity to leave because they fulfilled their credits choose to stay on campus. Or maybe students who choose to take courses elsewhere choose to stay on campus because they're in familiar territory, have a higher degree of support from staff. But those, seeing the relevance and the interest there, we can kind of recapture some of that too.
Yes.
Thank you for the work you're doing. I mean, this, to me, so I've got a senior graduating. He's going to go to college, but has no idea. He's going to try to find his pathways in college. I would have much preferred that he started here. You know, great opportunities. I love the idea that it helps gives people the opportunity to stay close to Stillwater if that's what they want to do. Gives them the ideas of what working could look like, whether it's college or whether it's local businesses. I mean, what other partnerships do you want from the community? Are there areas that you see a need that maybe you don't have connections with yet?
I would say we're looking for any connection we can make. So I had a couple kids who were interested in being a mortician. I thought of the few places that I could go to for that. There's always a need if it arises. I would say the one thing that we would ask is that you are engaged with, like when you pay attention to the communications. If you see something that you're interested in, then you reach out to us. We're reaching out to people, but we can't reach out to everybody. There will be a need, especially as we expand this. Right now, we have a lot of partners, and they're excited to work with us. But maybe, like we were saying, we need to do a better job of marketing this so people know what we're doing. So come to a function, come to the career fair, ask your kids about it, encourage them to talk to us and do some career coaching. So your senior should come down and talk to us, and it's not too late. So that's what I would say.
Thanks.
I was going to, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Don, I just want to thank you again for doing these programming reviews. It's, as a board member, very, very helpful, and hopefully as a community, very helpful and informative, so appreciate that. And, one thing that kind of stands out to me is when I was going through the campaign last fall, just out of the blue, just unsolicited, people were like, hey, have you met Bob and Rachel? You should talk about the stuff they're doing in career pathways. And I had very limited understanding at that point. And so as I've been able to learn more, I mean, it's very impressive the work that you do, especially just at 1.6. That's, and I don't know what other programs with that small that impact so many students. And especially, I think, are in alignment with our operational plan. I mean, there hits all 4 of them. That's significant. So kudos on that. As I kind of think about this program and some opportunities and laid out some really good opportunities, I think there's, within teachers, I mean, how we create the alignment of, you kind of mentioned the externship, but, how can we connect real world skills with students and as they're, teaching that, how can we kind of integrate career pathways in those conversations on a regular basis? I would think that would be a huge opportunity to further market and bring, word to the programming that you're doing. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's the key. If we can get all the staff to know what we do, know what the opportunities there are for students, understand our new economy, and be able to embed that into their coursework, identify students based on their interests, their skill sets, and encourage them to go explore these opportunities. That's how we scale it up.
I think we have opportunities too from district and site vision cards and then creating our action cards where we can look at those strategic directions, and at the high school, how do we align our programming to meet those needs and to show that, Pathways does that, but then how can we do that within the classroom and make an action, and a commitment to that. But we want that voice and buy-in from everyone, and that's where we're hoping to do that work and really dive into that. And not just Pathways, but lots of things, and connect the dots for people and really align our work and focus it moving forward.
Very well. And kudos on the career fair. For being, attending it, I would never have known that was the first one. I think that was a huge success by all account, and excited to see what that will continue to grow into as you get the word out. What a great opportunity for students to connect and, and network. So, well done.
Thank you.
This was really good. I think that for me, I really strongly feel like this is the way that we should be going. It fits so in line with our vision, and it's what parents and families want. I know they're not aware of it based on some of the survey results, but it is what they are telling us that they want. They just don't know it exists. And I think it's like we have this high school, and it's like Pathways is kind of like this add-on instead of really like surrounding the whole organization and being like that foundation level course. So I forget if it was you, superintendent, who just mentioned that, like a freshman seminar where you would have certain, like, we're going to have you build a resume. We're going to have you take that interest inventory. We're going to show you how to study and navigate and advocate for yourself. And it really does fit in line with everything. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing here. It's just good to hear about it. And yeah, kudos. Really good.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
The opportunity.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
very much.
All right.
And thank you for your patience as you
Yeah. No, this is a long one, but good information. Good information. So we have nothing else on the agenda, so we're adjourned.
I guess 9:30.
Like it or not.
Yes, we are adjourned.